Hello, everyone. Can I be heard this time? I hope I can. So this time I'm just using my webcam mic just because my proper setup has clearly gone mad. The important question is, can you hear me? Am I loud and clear? Am I coming through? Or do I sound like some sort of weird, echoey version of Andy? Regardless of that, this is take two of my attempt to start our stream this evening. The first one turned into a crackle fest where absolutely everything went wrong. For those of you who don't know, I map Kalegen every week, and by every week I mean I've had a 4-month break. But I'm back. This is part 16 of what was 15 previous sessions, some of which were just a couple of hours long, some of which went on forever. And what we do every week is we sit down, we do a bit of Kalegen, which is one of the primary cities in the Reikland in the Empire, a part of Warhammer, for you Warhammer fans out there. And we slowly but surely expand it until one day eventually we'll be finished. This isn't my map, although I happen to be the one that's doing all the drawing just now. This is a map that we're all creating together. So if you're coming in and this is your first go and you fancy saying, hey, wouldn't you like to put one of those things in there? Now is your opportunity to do so. As we go, we also discuss the lore of the place, exactly why it is the way it is. We discuss obscure Warhammery facts as well, and we are somewhat prone to going off on various tangents about various subjects from across the Warhammer world as we slowly but surely pin this place down. For those of you that don't know, Kalegen is a political centre of the Reikland. It is run by the Holzkrug family, who are, to cut a very long story short, one of the most important families in the Reikland. They used to be emperors in the past. Indeed, if Warhammer the Old World sticks with the original writing up of the pre-Magnus era, it will be a Holzkrug on the throne in Altdorf in the time of the Old World. I highly doubt that'll be the case for the new Old World game, because they'll do things in their own direction, as is often the case with Games Workshop. But that'll be half the fun as we attempt to incorporate all their new bits into our versions of our empires. So hopefully it's all going through. I'm going to bring up some comments to double check, and that'll also give you an idea, if this is your first time, how we do our stuff, because I'm going to be chatting with you all as we go. So, hey, now is that G-like or Glike? I'm not entirely sure. Feel free to drop into the comment and tell me. It appears that we're off. Jinx comes in. I would just like to do a quick call out to Jinx because he has just backed us over on the Lawhammer Patreon. You rock! You're the best. Jinx best. So yeah, anyway, crystal clear. Brilliant. So my voice is coming through. I'll listen to it coming back. In fact, I don't need my headphones on just now. I'll listen to it when I come through. Loud and clear from Martin as well. Good to hear that you're here, Martin. For those of you that don't know, Martin has been building up a huge depository of information over through on the Discord side of affairs. If you want to know our Discord account, go check inside the comments to this video. You'll find Discord in there. If you don't, I've screwed up. It's meant to be in there. Click on the Discord and you'll find that there's an entire channel set aside. In fact, there's a whole server section set aside for Kalegen and all the locations there that we're building. So if you want to know anything from our previous 15 videos, it'll all be in there. And I do recommend, if you just love your Warhammer lore, just check the previous 15 videos anyway. There's tons of great chat. And if you happen to be like Yalib, he's one of our frequent commentators as we make our way through. Yalib likes to watch me back at 2x speed just so that he can catch all of the details. I sound ridiculous at 2x speed. I would just like to make that clear. Right, so let's bring up the map. I was working on a small section just before the previous stream went wrong. So this time I'm just going to zoom out completely so that we can see everything that's going to pass. So let's go ka-ching, add to stream. And let's use that setup. That's a bit better. So there we are. There's the map as we so far have it. It's approximately 1/3 done within the city walls itself. But in terms of the overall map, we have a lot of work to do yet. So there's an awful lot of painting to go, so to speak. Although it's not strictly speaking painting, we are, after all, doing it digitally. We're currently working on the north part of Kalegen where the palace is. This is where the Holzkrugs themselves live. Now, the Holzkrugs have got ancestral, let's say, palaces, castles up in the hills not far away from here. This place has been built very recently. Many of the buildings are new. And although there's a couple of older sections, most of Kalegen has been built within the last 30 to 50 years. So most of what we're putting down here is, in the greater scheme of Warhammer age, very new. This entire place was filled with forest, for example. And we've already had some interesting tales coming from that when we look down into the corner where we do have probably what is amounts to a tree man still down there, although nobody realizes the spirit that lies within. But at the moment, we are dealing with this large palace that we're slowly but surely building. Large ballrooms up to the top, a whole variety of wings that sit on various sides, a massive mustering square in the middle. We have added a lot of detail to it, much of which I've forgotten. As I say, it's been months since I was last in this particular part of the map. So if you happen to be there in any of our previous streams and you'd like to say, hey, Andy, you said you were going to build this thing in here. Now's the time to make yourself known, because I'll be damned if I can remember anything. The only thing I can say with any certainty is, and even then I'm not entirely certain, pretty sure that I wanted to have, I'm going to bring up a quick brush here just so that I can mark, let's make it a nice red so we can see it. So up here, if you can see me scribbling there, pretty sure I wanted to put a menagerie, and I planned for it to be there. Over here, in this very tight space between the city walls as they were built, we were going to have the beginnings of a personal garden, but I'm pretty sure upon extra thinking that the Hallskrug gardens are going to go beyond the walls, and they're going to be walled off on the outside as well, which I think will be pretty fun. I have no real recollection of what we're going to put into that area, so I'm going to presume some sort of private gardens for guests. I'm quite convinced many of the Hallskrugs were living here, and there'll be all manner of apartments. There's a wizard's tower sitting there, a very large ballroom with the top of it split up into 20 sections. And as I recall, each one of those sections was going to be for one of the zodiac signs, the 20 zodiac signs of the Warhammer world. I might be wrong. I'll find out in a moment as I go through the comments. If I am saying anything wrong and you were there for the previous streams, do please correct me, because I'm happy to just go, no, let's change it back to what it was before. Other than that, we've got a large entrance area there for when all the ambassadors from the various types, from the various parts of the world arrive here. Now, obviously, most of the ambassadors and the embassies that they're looking after will be in Altdorf, and Kalegen's quite some distance from Altdorf. But the High Ambassador for the Reikland is the Duke of Hallskrug, is the man that very much lives here. And although he may live in Altdorf for large parts of his life, he is also down here. And he wants to impress folks, which is very much the whole point of this curving road that's making its way down there. Most of the buildings along that road have been specifically built to look as impressive as possible until you eventually break free and arrive at the palace itself. There's obviously guest chambers in there for very important guests, but we're going to be moving up towards this section, which is the upper class area of the city. And up at the very top here, it's a big hill, and on top of the hill, there's a variety of palaces, important hostels, and similar. And many visiting dignitaries will be over there. If you're wondering what this little section is up here in the middle, that is the old Garden of Moor from before the time when the city was built in the area, and it was just a village. If I just quickly increase my brush size so that you can see where I'm going to scribble this. The original old village, which was over there, I'm not sure if you're going to be able to see that because I'm probably in the road. So let me just move the screen a little. There we go. So the original village was over there, and they had a road that moved all the way through up to the original Garden of Moor, which was separate to them. For those of you who don't know your Warhammer lore too well, the Garden of Moor is where the dead are interred. There was also originally, before this city was built up, a big state army fort where the state armies of the Duchy of Hallskrug were stationed, at least a good chunk of them. So that's an original and old building section as well. And that also has a direct through to the old Garden of Moor there. So the original setup was something like that, a triangle. And that has been significantly expanded upon ever since. Finally, sitting up at the top, we've got a new Garden of Moor, which is going to be built here because obviously as the city expanded massively, the needs of the city also expanded. And so far as you can probably see, there's a note there to put a Ranald in Fair. Beyond that, if this is your first time, there is a shed load of really cool locations in this. If you're a Warhammer Fantasy roleplay player, you can probably go through each one of the streams and find a chunk of really cool locations, whether it's the halflings that are here, there's a bunch of ogres sitting here, there's a big massive shipyard over there, a massive sunken ship that went very wrong in the past sitting over there, a huge shrine to Grandfather Reich, which is sitting on a massive statue that rises out of an original piece of rock sitting on the river. That's pretty cool too. Obviously, the State Army fortress up here, a large chunk of the city that has collapsed down into marsh and mire because the city planning was not necessarily the best. Yeah, there's lots of really cool places to have a look around. I do particularly like the knights that are over here, the Knights of the Swan. So we're going to be detailing today our palace. But before I start diving into that, I'm going to have a quick check at our comments. So I left the comment up from before. I apologize. So Happy Jacklad, the bloke person, is coming in clear. Excellent. It's Jinx. Do you like equals Jinx? Do you like? Oh, are you the same person? I feel like an idiot if that's the case. I'm an idiot. Long Shadow Games. Long time no mapping. I agree. And it is good to be back, isn't it? For those of you who don't know, I have been exceedingly ill. It's one of the reasons why there's loads of pills all over the place here. It's also one of the reasons that this stream probably won't be as long as some of my previous ones. It's not just that I don't have the stamina. I actually can't stay sitting down for too long for a variety of reasons. It hasn't stopped me doing very long streams with, say, for example, Lore Master of Sotek, but I generally take painkillers before I do that. I don't want to push myself too much this evening, though, because I'm going to be streaming tomorrow evening, obviously playing the Lawhammer game, and we're up to episode 12 there. And Kalegen, this particular city, is getting built to a degree for that as well, because it's going to be a center of not just diplomacy, but let's say action. That's an interesting way of putting it. A center of potential action, because the Hallskrugs are the primary rivals to the Imperial line for the Princedom of Reikland. And that's pretty important. Also, you might not like the word princedom, you might prefer principality. Warhammer has used both. So yes, it is good to be back, but be aware I'm not 100% healthy yet. Carl Nichols says, much better this time. Thank you very much. It's Jinx, just my YouTube name. Yeah, I have similar issues. I've got multiple YouTube accounts. Indeed, it's caused me some issues with my Lawhammer account in the last day, but let's just not go into that. 1.75 times is the legibility limit. Yes, I do tend to talk quickly sometimes, so running me at 2 times speed is not necessarily recommended. Regaldo 88. Hey Andy and all. Indeed. Hey to you too. Long Shadow says Andy mapping at 2 times speed has to be bonus content. I actually recommend, if you are going to some of the older videos and you want to see it just unfold quickly, 2 times speed is quite impressive. I mean, at least 2 of the videos are over 7 hours long. That's still 3.5 hours worth of stream in both cases. So be aware, there is a lot of it. General Caster comes in, managed to accidentally put my own custom settlement under the rule of the Hallskrugs. Nice. Without realizing they were a creation. On top of that, the rulers of my village are the Halsers. Love it. That's great. One of the great joys of, one of the really great joys, I think, actually, of Warhammer is just how willing everybody is to make up their own shit for it. That's for a variety of reasons. It's because Games Workshop themselves have often not detailed large areas, leaving it for people like ourselves to fill up those details. But Games Workshop have also, through its various licenses, contradicted themselves all over the place. So you almost have a license yourself to just go in and say, well, I'll just ignore the bits I don't like, take the bits that I do like, and create something new. And that's totally okay. Further, Games Workshop's view of what the Warhammer world is, and indeed the Empire, has changed massively over the number of decades that it's been out. And you may have started, say, back in the 80s. If you did, you have a very different view of what the old world is in comparison to someone who may have started in, say, the noughties, or may have started with something like Warhammer Total War. And that means that you're going to almost certainly stick to what you know. Don't we all? That being the case, your version of the Empire's almost certainly to be completely different to everyone else's. That's basically why we're called Lawhammer, because this isn't, let's say, Warhammer, because it's not, because we're building our own version of it, aren't we? It's Andy Law's version, so to speak. And at home, let's say, for example, General Caster will be Casterhammer. And that's a lot of fun. Moving on, let's go to Tommy Hammer. Amazing. Great. I'm glad to hear that. Regaldo goes, this is awesome content. Well, we'll see. We haven't started properly yet. Wish I had half the talent. Well, Job, I will bring out one thing, presuming that Job is the way to pronounce your name. This particular style of mapping is not just achievable. I've done a tutorial to show you exactly how to do this. Now, I don't have a link in my comments for this in the video description, I don't think. I'll add it in afterwards, but I will say that Rookery Publications, that's a company that I co-own with a bunch of super awesome people, including two of the people who play Lawhammer. I did a tutorial on there to show you how to do exactly this style of map. In fact, the first video for mapping Kalegen was done over on the Rookeries, well, on their channel. And you'll be able to pop over there, watch the first one. And if you're interested in knowing how to do it, we've got a Patreon over on the Rookery, and there's ways that you can access it over there. Just go check out the Rookery, inside the Rookery Patreon, and up there it'll have all the deets. In fact, I've just changed all the deets up there, so it should be super easy for you to find. My next tutorial is going to be writing up locations, which is quite handy for this, because one of the great joys of this is we're writing up potentially hundreds of locations. And one of the things I'm going to do for my next tutorial is teach not just how to write up a location, but to do it concisely. Because one of the great problems of fan material in particular is that somebody gets an idea that they like, and they write a good 1,000 words or so, and then they look at the 50 to 60 to 70 pieces that they need to build for their own location. Suddenly they realize that they're going to have to write 70,000 words. That's a novel just to create their own little home city. So they just don't. They end up writing 4 or 5, the ones that their PCs go to, or they write up a few in great depth, and then they go somewhere else and they really wish they'd spent a little bit of time doing that. One of the things in my next tutorial, which is, I think, a week on Saturday, that's going to be all about building up your own version of locations. But yes, I think you probably have more than half the talent necessary to create this exact map. MP says, it looks like a fairly large city. It is indeed a fairly large city. What's the scale? The scale isn't specifically on it, although we do have one. I do wonder if I go view up here, and I go extras. There we go. Is that the correct scale? Yes, it is. Woo! Okay, so you might not be able to see this very well on the screen, so I'll actually put a box on so you can see it. That's approximately, let me just get that correct. There we go. Do that correct. That's approximately 100 yards by 100 yards, or about 80 meters by 80 meters. That's probably a very poor translation between the two measuring systems. But that's about 100 yards, and that's the scale that we've been using for this map. The population that we were heading towards was approximately 15,000 people for this place. It has expanded massively for a variety of reasons, maybe 10 to 15,000. If people were there for the original streams, you might be able to correct me if I've got those numbers wrong. The demographics are correct for this size of city and for this scale. A lot of thought has gone into exactly how that all works. If you want to know more about it, go watch the first video. It's all covered in that one. Nico comes up. Andy, finish the palace and tells the story of the wizard who works for Hallskrug, teaching his daughter. Is there a story behind that wizard? So we've already discussed that to a degree, and that wizard will be an elf, an Aeonir elf. And the reason that there's an Aeonir elf teaching her rather than the colleges of magic is because it's actually illegal, completely not allowed for a noble who is a witch to inherit. Witches are not allowed to hold titles in the Empire. It's just not the done thing. Now, they may get trained as a wizard of the Empire, but that is effectively their title. They become a wizard or a magister or whatever it might be. They're not allowed to actually inherit. And there's a lot of long-standing reasons for why they're not allowed to. Now, Games Workshop might come and rewrite that at some point, but as it currently stands, that's definitely the case. Thyris Gorman, for example, the Supreme Patriarch of the 8 colleges of magic during the time of the Enemy Within and during the time of Warhammer, the 4th edition. He is a noble from House Gorman. And House Gorman is a very old Reiklander line. They are a line that spans all the way back almost to the first times during Sigmar's time, where they were the Gore men who covered themselves in red. And the Gormans, well, the Gormans can't have him inherit. But that doesn't mean he doesn't have an enormous quantity of power. After all, he is best mates with the Emperor, and he is the Supreme Patriarch of the 8 colleges of magic. So, yes, we have an Aeonir who's teaching that, and that Aeonir is probably in here somewhere. And we also have a wizard's tower over here who will not be the Aeonir. That's probably going to be a celestial wizard that has been attracted in, although I might have that wrong if anyone wants to correct me. Martin says the menagerie in the top right. Good. So we're going to be dropping that in there. And I'll probably do that after I figure out what the hell we're doing with that building. That'll be the first thing that we'll draw. After that, Carl drops in. Hi, Carl. Sounds about correct from what I remember. I think it's correct. I might have some details wrong, but I'm relatively close. I think one bit of garden space was going to be for a sporting pitch or a green of some kind. Yeah, definitely. We want to give the idea that the nobles like to do their equivalent of some form of, well, we don't really have an equivalent to Warhammer tennis yet. We do have Warhammer football, stroke rugby with midden ball, or snot ball if you play the more illegal variant with snotlings wrapped up in bits of leather. But we don't really have a tennis equivalent. It might be nice to bring up some sort of spiky, skull-laced version of tennis that we can drop perhaps behind here where guests and such like can get into a nice covered court. That could be a lot of fun. The front left building is stables. Yes. So I'm looking at what here, I guess. Stables, thank you very much. I appreciate that, Carl. James comes in and says, it really is straight from the source. I'm not entirely sure what you mean if you're just talking about me chatting about the shit in this map. Yes, it is pretty much for me. Alan says, I have, excellent to see you. Switch to YouTube from Twitch just so Andy does a double take. That's just not fair. Dude, you're confusing me. Jinx comes in. It's going to be got a Lawhammer so I can experience it firsthand. Oh, well, thank you. Lawhammer, woo! Hey, Andy. If you don't know Andy, you should. Andy wrote a good chunk of the Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay starter set, and he's one of our players. He plays Father Lorepold, and he's coming to the stream. Hey, Andy. Hey, Andy. And thanks for making these streams. Good vibes. Yeah, I do enjoy these streams. I'm going to go through these a bit quicker so we can get started. Yes, Nurgle got this, man. Totally did. Sigmar, protect him. Thanks. I think I need it. Even right now, I can feel a slight skein of sweat on my forehead. I'm also sitting in a very, let's say, fixed fashion. If I move in another way, I can cause myself an injury. Evening all. Hello, Heron. It's an absolute delight to see that you've made it. Undead and alive. Hey, oh, you're from Portugal. Marvelous. Do you know that we have Celtic roots, so we are brothers and more. I love Warhammer. You know what? I also have Portuguese roots, so that's interesting. In fact, I've got roots to, I feel like I'm name dropping, but I've got roots to almost every royal family in Europe because of some bizarre, unexpected relationship that my wife, Lindsay, found about 15 years ago. We found out that I was related to Robert the Bruce here in Scotland, various Polish nobility, all the way back to old Constantinople nobility, the great kings of France. Not an enormous number of the English kings, but a good chunk of them. That was weird. So that includes as well a bunch of Spanish, Portuguese, and various other Iberian people. So yeah, I like to think you and I were brothers. Yeah. The plebiscite comes in. Evening. Great to see that you're here. Buenas patatas. I'm guessing I'm pronouncing that correctly. Great to see you. Hi. Both persons said I had a slight niche question about Kalegen. Let's go for it. Specifically about the Kalbergunder. I read that it's white with body of red. Yes. What do you have any opinions on its tasting notes? So I wrote that one. So obviously I've got some opinions. And the tasting notes are primarily red. In that it looks like a white. You drink it, and its undercurrent is primarily red, but it's also, as I recall, quite cold in terms of its natural place. I hope that gives a little bit of illumination. I'll probably write more about it because I've already done the stamp for the front of the wine bottles for that. Getting to playing Sotex Hammer is real fun. Totally is. Totally is. I got started with, I'm really glad you're enjoying that, by the way. I got started with Warhammer Mark of Chaos. I love Mark of Chaos. Indeed, Mark of Chaos influences much of my master map. I changed the entirety of the topography around Talapine where the conclusion happens. And I added one location called the Dunkelcoast. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong because I'm not German. But the Dunkelcoast, coast, whatever, the Dark Coast, is one of the provinces that got added into Enemy and Shadow's Companion. So that was quite nice. Hey, Tom, great to see you. Oh, hi. Oh, hi in return. Jinx, oh, you're speaking to someone else. So I'll just skim by that one. Great to have you back, Annie. It's great to be back, Fred. It has been altogether too long. Right, you're like you're a gnome. Short, kinda, but it's not just about writing short. I'll explain more when I do that masterclass. How have you spent the hobby since now? You're speaking to, let's go pop down to Justin. I'm writing the player's itinerary of the Reich from Shadowheim to Karma. Nice. Among other things, I'm using your political sketch map. Good call. The player comes to two Reich Graviates, Gruten and Löder. Yes, in Sigmar's name, what is a Reich Graviate? Is there anything analogous to it in real life? Yes, there is. The Rhine graphs, it's rather similar to that. Basically, it's a duke on the right with a large burg, a castle that looks over it. The right graviates have got an ancient title that when Magnus the Pious rebound the empire together and tried to effectively simplify all of the noble ranks that were everywhere, get rid of all the random kings and queens and bizarre titles that were around. Some people dug their feet in. Right graviates are one of them, although they are in effect just dukes. But they're dukes that have slightly different powers in terms of the state army and how many regiments that they're allowed to muster, because they are right on the Reich and need to defend against potential invasion up the Reich. And that's significantly more the case after the Magnus the Pious rule came to an end and Westerland became the Wasteland. Kingston, now you're speaking to each other. Gruber then says, lots of the stream there for a while. Back with you. Glad to hear that you're back. ANS goes, have you ever mapped an elven city? How do they differ from human cities? You know, I've never done it for Warhammer. I've done it for other things like, say, Critical Role. And ultimately, in terms of the mapping process, it's exactly the same. But in terms of how they're built, completely different. One of the things with human cities, they tend to be square. There's lots of other things in it, but square. If you go to dwarven cities, you tend to find, particularly when you're dealing with their top above ground stuff, octagons. They work in octagons, often with squares with just small bits cut off, but it's often octagons and then other shapes moving around. If you look at any of the buildings that have been built for the dwarves or any of the bits of scenery that was used in Warhammer, you tend to find that's the case, particularly if you look at, say, Warhammer Online. The elves, though, they're much more fluid. And whilst, yes, they might have straight walls that move between them, often they've got curves. So in general, it's the same process, but the underlying basic shapes that you use tend to be much more fluid and much more, beautiful. The aesthetics are important for an elven city. You're speaking to each other. Thyrus is also an angry man in the Empire. Yes, indeed. Don't forget the spooky Ulgu hedge maze. We were going to do a hedge maze, weren't we? Thanks. Let's pull that in now so I don't forget it. And let's just pop over, make sure I'm on the lines. There we go. I'll just write that there. I'll write maze as well. Apparently, I won't write maze. I'll just write some random nonsense. Let them have a cricket field. I'll leave that for outside of here because there's not enough space to do something that would be the equivalent of the cricket field. The space in this area is very tight. Croquet is almost certainly a Sigmarite thing. Yes, it's all about hammers. We discussed this, I think, about 2 streams ago, maybe last stream, and I 100% agree. We need to have some sort of croquet lawn or some equivalent now. SD comes in. Great to see you, SD. Just popping on to wish you all happy mapping. Board game night for you tonight. Enjoy board gaming. I'm delighted to see it's going. Martin says, had a draft of a Noble Racket game over on the Kalegen channel. Brilliant. If you could ping that up with an @me, that would be really good because I wouldn't mind looking at that. Interesting idea. I agree. Andy confirmed in real life protagonist. Indeed. We're almost at the end of the comments as well, which means they're about to start mapping. Where the Celts in Portugal. Admit you didn't know that. Go speak amongst yourselves about that one. Papa Vaniglia? I've almost certainly said that wrong. Hi, Andy. Hi, and welcome back to mapping. I'm delighted to be back, actually. It's been altogether too long. Carl, do we need a side entrance for the help, or would they use the front? I think that there almost certainly is side entrances, and they're going to be down around this area. There's a bunch of relatively poor quality houses over there, but a good chunk of the actual staff will be living there permanently. They're not going to be leaving ever. They sleep there. They're up in the servants' quarters. They're up at ridiculous hours in the morning, going fixing stuff, working from pretty much dawn all the way through to dusk, and then hiking it back to bed again. This is pretty much the standard. Having people coming in and out is a security concern, particularly for an area where there's going to be such high diplomacy and the potential for assassinations. Security is going to be important to them. So the vast majority of the staff will be mostly in-house, I think, unless anyone's got something that says, yeah, no, I think it should be like this. Adding another mapping stream to my list of things I'd like to see. Oh, wouldn't we just like to see that one mapped? That would be gorgeous. Although it's far more likely I'm probably going to do something like Altdorf at some point, because my version of Altdorf is quite different. Obscurity says, I can imagine a maze has bushes with purple flowers in it, and it's a purple maze. Purple maze, purple maze. Dun, dun, dun. General Casa says, what's Kalegen military situation like? Apologies, I haven't seen the previous map streams yet. So I won't go into this in any great detail, but I will touch upon it just so that you get an idea. There is a significant military in Kalegen, and it's spread between, let me just get rid of my lines there. It's spread between the State Army barracks that are down there. That's up on a giant igneous plug, a word that I did not expect to be using twice in the same week. But yeah, there you go. That came up in our stream for the Lawhammer streams, episode 11. So a giant igneous plug, which has a variety of fun stories written about it. That's where the main State Army regiments are. There's a bunch of Bright Wizards up there too in training. And they also have further smaller barracks down there, shipbuilders over there, and obviously a ton of soldiers that will be working in and out from the palace itself. We also have a knightly order that's down here. That's their chapter house there. There's quite a lot of military in and around the area. So, yeah. Okay, I think I'm going to get stuck in. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go here and start blocking out this building here because we hadn't done it from last time. So all I've got is a loose, badly drawn rectangle, which we're going to turn into something. We've got the wall for the main castle wall all the way around it. So let's just quickly attach that too. We're going to have some form of hedge maze in the middle. If anybody has a maze that they would like to see reproduced in our hedge maze, or alternatively, if you're sitting at home right now and you think, hey, I've got graph paper, I can make a cool maze in approximately 15 minutes, go do that now. If anybody manages to get a maze to me over in the Discord channel, in the Kalegen channel, I will pop that maze directly in here. I've got Discord purposefully opened over here, just in case anyone drops anything to Kalegen. Now, if you try to post anything directly into the chat here with links, it's just not going to work very well. So if you want to get me to do anything in particular that requires pictures or anything similar, go drop that into Discord, our Discord channel. The link for our Discord channel, if you haven't joined already, is inside the, well, only if you're on YouTube, it's inside the description for the video. So if you're sitting out there going, I could build a maze that would be really cool for the Hallskroogs to send and tour various people around, go do that now. If nobody comes at me with one in the next 15 minutes to half an hour, I will just make one up myself as I go. But if you want to go wild in it, go wild in that. And in fact, because that's quite likely to be something that somebody might make a comment on, I will very quickly see if any comments come in that before I start my drawing there. Well, first one is, what are Kalegen's main enemies? Beastmans, Greenskins, etc. At the moment, they don't, strictly speaking, have main enemies. The city is altogether too new. It's been built within the last 30 to 50 years. Skaven are attempting to infiltrate the place in a variety of ways. That's been covered in previous streams. The fact that they've moved into the forest is arguably an issue for various local spirits. There were beastmen in the area, but we're down in the Reikland, which is a far safer forest in comparison to, say, the Forest of Shadows, or further to the north, the Drakvold. This place is relatively well patrolled, so there's not great external threats here, which is one of the reasons it's been able to expand at such a swift rate without any great threats. If you want to speak to the city's true great threats, it's politics, and the fact that almost certainly civil war is going to bring that one down. Hey, Lord Master! And Lord Master, he's the best. Oh yeah, good to see ya. Hope you're good out there. Good old Sotek. I'll be seeing you on Sunday, just to make sure that we mention that. And if you don't know, Lord Master and I will be almost certainly, I think it's already been nailed down, but you haven't nailed it down yet, do say that you're nailing it down. But I'm pretty sure that we're going to be having ourselves a pretty long chat about Nagash, who Nagash is, and where Nagash came from. I'm assuming that's the case because he might be playing Baldur's Gate instead. Yeah, drops in, says hello. Did you miss much? No, not much. There's lots of introduction, and also my sound not working with my first attempt. You have some kind of arcane rune in the maze. You could have some kind of arcane rune in the maze if anyone wants to give that a go. Oh, Cogley, shit! Do you have any graph paper? Doesn't need to be on graph paper. It can be white paper. Whatever you can manage to do, get a picture of into our Discord. Hey, Sweet Melancholy. Hi, Andy. You're great. Thank you very much. Your mapping streams made me start mapping my Border Princess map for the Renegade Crowns. Oh, I'm delighted to hear that. I have a soft spot for Renegade Crowns, even though that was mapped a bajillion years ago. Symbol, one of the Orders of Magic, or a Griffin. Oh, yeah, it could be so cool. Found some graph paper. Excellent. What about Twin-tailed Comet symbol? Oh, that's quite nice, particularly given that the Hallskroogs are, for all they don't have the support of the Cult of Sigmar, because the Cult of Sigmar supports, strangely enough, the Emperor. They are very much doing things to try and ensure that they very much can curry favor with them. So that's not a bad idea. Well, that says I'm just hanging here till my Baldur's Gate 3 finishes down this. So I wasn't wrong about the Baldur's Gate 3 then, was I? Nagash is confirmed. Excellent. I'm looking forward to that. We will be chatting Nagash this Sunday at 4 p.m. UK time. That's whatever your local time is. And we are going to have a laugh. If you missed our discussion about Malekith, once this stream's done, if you're bored, go watch it because it was freaking awesome. It says, would high elves use magics in building cities? And yes, they would. And how would it work? There's a lot to say in that one. That's a whole stream by itself. Yeah, it's amazing time. Yeah, go give it a go. Swan-shaped maze is on brand. It is. Now, the symbol of House Hallskrug is a swan. It's a crowned swan. So if you can think of any crap way to get a swan into a maze, maybe a pair of wings to either side for the maze with a central part, that would go down very well. That's very well on brand. And it's a purple maze, purple skull maze. Would it attract shy? It's potential problem with the Garden of More nearby. And you know what? If it was the correct shapes and it had the correct sense around it, yes, it probably would grab some shyish in some fashion. Comment totally work. Yeah, I agree. The fire would let you add some winding, twisting paths. It would be awesome. In the center circle, you have a statue or something. Yeah, I agree. Regardless says, Lord Master, when you start playing very soon, I imagine. That'll be when it's downloaded and half the stream disappears as go watch and play. And you'd be right to do so. So, I've got to the end of my comment list. I'm going to drop off there. In fact, I'm going to leave that one comment up just so that I don't lose my place for when we go to the next section. So Andy's going to be accompany me for a wee while while we go, right, let's fill in this building. Right, so we've got ourselves a wing of the castle. I'm imagining this one. Let's straighten it off a little bit so that we don't make them absolutely terrible builders. So let's do that. Let's double it up. Now, as I said with the various other parts of building this palace, I can't believe I remember this. One of the goals is not to necessarily add all the detail that would be there if you're mapping something like this, because some of these buildings would, from the top, be extraordinarily fine with multiple chimneys doing multiple things, many of which would have symbols of the various gods attached to them, many of which would have statues running along the edge. If you try to draw all of that on a map of this scale, your map will look very mucky, untidy, it'll be very difficult to read. And ultimately, this map is being designed for people to use, to actually read, to work their way through, if they're a player or a GM, and understand how they can get from A to B and what sort of buildings are there. So one of the most important things you can do if you're building a map to this size is ensure that you've got the scale just about right so that everyone can say that building is quite large, this one is less large, this one's really huge. You add a certain amount of ornamentation if it's on, that's important. Let me just get that there. Okay, so if we've got, pardon me as I interrupt myself as I decide what I'm going to put on here. I'm imagining possibly some sort of memoriam here maybe as well, because we're very close to the old Garden of More. We can actually get a path going from one to the other there, and then the old path that will lead into some old tombs sitting at the center there, or some new ones, and we can use this as a memoriam representing everything that happened with the state army of Kalegen for the last long time. Now, we've already got some of that covered up in the state army barracks, so we won't completely write over the same thing, but I think that we can add something impressive that they can show off to visiting dignitaries to boast about everything that the Hallskrugs did in the past. So that's quite fun. So I'm going to quickly finish off this section here. Quickly build in my little dashes to suggest that this is crenellated all the way down. Just do that quickly. Right, okay, we've got something there. We're going to be having ourselves a menagerie in this section here, and we're not going to break the initial wall, so I'm going to put a tower in place here. And we'll make it square to match all the rest. And we'll give it a roof over the top of it. It's got a bit of overhang. There we go. And we will build our city wall that runs across from there. Now, our city walls are approximately that size. You can see they're marked in yellow. All of the city walls, when they're colored in, will be in yellow. There's something else worth mentioning on that. There's only 3 colors being used for our buildings, which is clearly massively unrealistic, because obviously if we're looking at buildings from above in the real Warhammer world, the real one, our buildings would have all manner of different roofing in place, whether it was slates or whether it was tiles or whether it's proper stone tops or whatever it might be. That does not make the map easy to read. If you have colors all over the place, it just makes it a big melange and a mess, and it starts looking like one of those magic eye pictures, and you're trying to figure out what it all means. So to make matters really, really simple for ours, all of the buildings that we're not going to write anything about in particular are in brown. You can see loads of them. All of the purple buildings are feature buildings or feature locations within a very big building that will have a write-up about it. A similar write-up to the ones that I'm going to do for the tutorial over on the Rookery a week from Saturday to explain how to do those. And then we have yellow, which is heavy city walls. There's also, you may note, some broken bits of yellow running all the way down through the middle here. That's because there used to be a city wall plan halfway through the city, but then when the current Duke took over, he expanded it significantly further. Okay, so we've got a wall that's about that thick. Let's just connect that through, and we're going to build ourselves a menagerie in here. If anyone's got any ideas for the menagerie, drop them in now while I quickly check if Kalegen has got anything going in it. It doesn't, so if you're building a map out there, it hasn't arrived yet. So let's pop onto the good old comments before I finish off this section. What Kalegen needs is a maze created by someone who had a dream for Lustria, the slan influence on them, and how to design hedges. Hedges. We already have a Lustrian connection down in the shipbuilding quarter. So, hey, 'twas ever this. Yeah, it was, wasn't it? Oxtutor, unintentional, or perhaps the gardener who made it as a necromantic connection. Quite. Gruber says, how about a wealthy townswoman who collects and grows rare plants in glasshouses in her townhouse wall garden? She has remarkable expertise in botany and herblore, quite Reverend Raya, head gardener at the castle. So I do quite like the idea of bringing Raya into this, because we haven't had much Ryan influence in most of the rest of the city that I recall. We've had mentions here or there about some of the minor deities, our Dairaths et al. But a Ryan one specifically, not really. Now, wealthy townswoman doesn't normally go with Ryan, so thus I actually quite like that idea more than I would have if it had just been your classic peasant. I quite like the idea of this in general, and in fact, I might go a little bit further. No, I think I quite like Ryan. I'm not against this idea. We're going to have to put gardens in somewhere. I think the gardens, the primary gardens, will be over on this side here. So if we're going to bring her in, she'll be over there. Built an ancient, it's a classic. Oh, it certainly is. As Andy says, building an ancient burial site. Gruber goes in botany and herblore, quiet reverence. Right, I already covered that one. Hey, Papa, hedge mage maze. Well, wow. We already have hedge mazes in the city over in the old part of town, so I probably wouldn't duplicate it unless we had the best idea. The maze burnt down after party. The resulting smoke still cloaks the blackened and fire-cracked limbs of the bushes as thick as... See, I would consider doing this if we had an older building, but we have something that's new and something that's being maintained. If it burnt down, it would have been replaced pretty much within days. They'd have been out sowing something new. A few months later, it had been built back, but they wouldn't allow it to sit and hang. So as much as I love that, we're not dealing with somebody who is poor. We're dealing with someone who's rich, who may have run out of a great deal of funds given how much money has been sunk into this, and may also be sinking a lot of money now over into Altdorf. But for all of that, there are still funds available for the simplest of hedge doing. Are we still getting our grassroots dancing hall at the palace? Yes, we are. It's up here, right there, with a zodiac stained glass window above it. It looks gorgeous. As soon as it finishes downloading, yes, indeed, you'll be off doing Baldur's Gate. 20 panels to match the... Yes, absolutely. Yep, I'm passing by the Lord Master Sotek chat. Dwarves often get hired to build towns or help with them. Yes, they do, and we have had long discussions about dwarves and exactly where they fit into this whole place. But most of this, in fact, has been built by humans. The garden has a bunch of Musalon roses. We are close to the Garden of Mordor. Might be nice, politically interesting. In the menagerie had a griffin. Well, we have a pretty long discussion about exactly what sort of big creatures are or are not here. This particularly came up with the State Army Barracks, and indeed there is a small eyrie right here off towards the side, which is pretty freaking cool. The menagerie is the large number of creatures that have been gifted to the Hallscrews as various diplomats from across the Empire and across the Old World have passed them things. And not only that, passed them from possibly on the other side of the world. If, I don't know, a Cathayan ambassador arrived, or alternatively a Nipponese one. Not that we have Nipponese ambassadorial links in our game. So this is largely the home for most of the not enormous creatures, although some of it has popped down to the State Army Barracks. With a secret passage leading from the menagerie to the higher up noble place, maybe a trapdoor in the menagerie for a failed charm test. I think that this place is not full of all the secret passages you would normally expect, because it's a fresh new build and it was done with a certain amount of expediency. It was pushed and pushed, and yes, there's a certain amount of layering upon layering over the last 50 years, but this is still a relatively new, fresh building. So it's not one that's built for deviousness. It's very much built for presentation. And although that does come hand in hand with a certain amount of deviousness. Actually, I'm not against that idea the more I think on it. Yeah, it matches the general grey tone. And by that, I mean the grey wind of magic, the amount of Vulgu that we're gathering in this place. That does sort of match. Do we make a new post in the forum to show off our maze, or is it more casual chat? There is a casual chat. In fact, I wish it might be worth making an ID for people who want to follow Kalegen. But if you go find yourself the Kalegen channel, there's one called channel. In fact, I'll just write here. The last person that posted there was Janice. That's Miss J. So I've just typed in right now here in the channel. It will hopefully pop up. If you go find the channel, the Kalegen channel will be in there. So that'll hopefully do. Got to be a circular cage hanging from a crane type structure. We do need to have at least something like that. Yeah. Hope you're doing well. Yeah, quite. I'll leave you to chat. In fact, go down to the not at. Oh, we still got at the moment. No, still at. Oh my goodness. A white lion in the menagerie. So yeah, would something like that have come? Now the white lions are, yeah, they're out of kingdom. They're quite likely to be passed over by one of the merchant princes, but they are possibly, yes, purely because they're so iconic. But yeah, possibly. I have in my version of Castle Reikland, that is the Emperor's equivalent to Hallscrews Menagerie. And it's pretty huge. It has creatures from all over the world. Well, this is going to be a smaller example of that. And it almost certainly does have more than one white lion over there. Stealing the head, stealing the head backs from the end. Yeah, that's Adventure Hooch just waiting to happen, isn't it? Martin pops in, we need to watch the last stream back. Yeah, but I recall a tower on the right side is spiraling aviary with cages holding all manner of birds. Oh, yeah, that's cool. That's cool. We'll make sure that happens, because that is cool, even if it wasn't in the last stream. Now, what we really need is tons of having a notable gnome or set of gnomes having influenced the construction of part of the city, set up an outside burrow for one of their clans. Now, there's a bit of an issue with that, given that the local gnomes to here are the gnomes of Glimdwaro, and they have more space than they can shake a stick at in there, because Glimdwaro was absolutely ruined by Grom the Paunch, and the remaining gnomes that are there are grumpily shaking their fists at each other. What maybe there might be a few hundred or so. I've got actual numbers written down somewhere, but they've got space for thousands. They're not really in a place where they're looking to expand with any great degree. However, I've already built a bunch of other burrows elsewhere in the Empire, many of whom are not in a bad place, some of whom are. But this is so far from there that I can't really see it being something that would particularly attract. But I'm not against the idea. White lion be interesting. There's a high elf zookeeper. Keeping the number of extra elves we've got down, because we already have quite a few elves kicking about. Cage Goblin, Night Goblin, or Rat-like Beastman, would that work? Yeah, so this is something that pops up and is often argued by various people who love or are keen on the lore as to whether you can have goblins, night goblins, snotlings, various other creatures, particularly sentient ones, being held in cages or even being used as jesters, as was done with one of the original Sigmar pictures. I say original, I was back for about 6th ed, possibly. Regardless, but Sigmar was lying back and there was a goblin with a jester hat at his feet, which caused all manner of a hoo-ha when that painting was done. But would it work? I think the answer to that is probably, but not necessarily. Anything that will be seen as a mutant, anything that will be seen as unacceptable by the cult of Sigmar is unlikely to be in there. It's more likely to be killed. It's more likely to be got rid of. So the answer is probably not, but probably depending upon how we pitch it. I imagine we could get some of these things in there. Now, if you're playing the enemy within, we even have legal dispensation potentially for that with the Mutant Edict, which could allow for a variety of creatures. For example, Altdorf Zoo is known for having a variety of snaggers and weird creatures there. And they might just be mutated things that they found a single example of. I wrote a bunch of those, as I recall, into just the core book, where there's a mention of some of the crazy creatures you might find in Altdorf Zoo. So that's the core rule book for Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. And yes, if Sigmar can have a pet goblin, so can we, god damn it. That being the case, let's sort out our part here. Before I do that, I'll see if anyone's maze maps. We've got one. Oh, it's in Lawhammer chat. Oh, that's just confusing. You brought it out the Kalegen channel. Can you move it down to the Kalegen channel if you're still watching, Andy? Just copy paste them down there so that we can keep all the Kalegen bits together, because that's Lawhammer chat and I'll get confused and not find it. That would be really, really handy. But we've already got our first attempt at a maze from Rogan. Thank you very much, Rogan. That's enormously appreciated. I'll see if anyone else brings anything in before I pick that up. While we're waiting for that, I will do our menagerie. So first thing we want to do is double check how big our wall is. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a quick paste over of the approximate width so I can copy that over. So I'll rub that out. That just means I can carry the same width across. So let's, oh, I'm drawing over my hand. I can't see a thing. Let me just twist around here. Apologize while I. There we go. That's slightly better as I go out of camera slightly as I put a big wobbly wall in. And I will draw over parts of that as we figure out where our menagerie goes up against it. We want to have our big twisting tower for our aviary, which I'm probably going to put here, hanging over. And I'm tempted to go round, but the Empire tends to build square. Like so. And then we'll build a round top for it, like so. Let's just quickly move that into place. Have ourselves a couple of extra tower bits. Have ourselves a bit coming off the side that folks can off the other side as well. And maybe off this side too. Let's make it a particularly impressive area. It's not the largest. I look at the overall place, but it's still pretty dang good. Alrighty, so we have about that much space there. This is going to be a small bit of garden and extra garden on the other side of the wall, which they're going to have to get over to. So if we loosely presume cages along the edges of the walls, we're not going to want it right beside this section because they're not going to want to. So we can make loose sections of cages in the middle. Cages up against that wall. A larger area for something relatively big and grazing in there. If anyone's got any other ideas for anything that should be in this area, now is the time to throw it up. Possibly a walkway, and that'll be a garden in the middle, so that's going to be green. So will that part. I'm going to quickly drop in. Have I got the color overlay in that? No, I don't, so I'm going to have to put the color in by hand. A little bit less color on that, please. So that's way too large, but that'll do. Just to put a bit of green in so we remember these bits are going to be green. Color that over in a moment. Right, before I just ping in those cages, I'll see if anyone's got any suggestions for those cages and then move on. Martin says, is there a distinction between chaos change beasts or the emergent species? I think that that's a really interesting question that is very poorly handled by Games Workshop in general, where they will add new creatures and say they've always been here, demogryphs, for example. They will say that demogryphs are magical and weird, or they will say they're just like everything else, a wolf. What's the difference between, say, a wolf and a griffin? Is one of them acceptable and the other one not? And I think there is a variety of answers to those, and depending on which version of the game you go to, you will get a different one. I'm of the opinion that the beast is stable. There's going to be all manner of zoologists out there who claim that this is just a normal creature. What's the difference between that and, say, a bear or an elephant? Have you looked at an elephant? They're crazy creatures. A giraffe, holy moly. Some of the fantasy creatures are no more fantasy to inhabitants of the Warhammer world than a giraffe, which is clearly mental. So the distinction between chaos change beasts and emergent species tends to be, is there a lot of them, or is it clearly a mutant of something else? Heron says the mutants are now legal. Could bugging them into a menagerie be a half measure to stick a plaster on the issue? Can't kill them. No, someone like the Halskrugs almost certainly are going to be on a different political position to everyone else. So whilst the Emperor is pushing forward the mutant edict in Altdorf, someone like Halskrug will be attempting to position himself on the opposite side so that he can garner support from anyone that thinks that the mutant edict is crazy. And let's be honest, that's most people. So that's really going to put a cat among the pigeons, so to speak. Or perhaps, I don't know, a cat amongst the griffins. Flip it round. Heron then suggests, considering prisoners, you know, that is true, but yeah, no, I don't think that they're going to be mutant lovers in this place. And who doesn't love a plot potential, a massive cage filled with slightly peeved mutants? That I think would work really well for outside the place. There's definitely something that we could do with that. Plus monsters. Now we're talking. That's something we definitely do. That, man, is a theologically charged question. It is absolutely exactly the kind of thing Leopold and I could argue about. I think you're spot on. Absolutely spot on. Is there a thing as a docile treekin? Docile is such an interesting word. We have dabbled in with some spirits and some various tree bits and bobs down in the south of the city. We're talking about maybe 3 or 4 videos ago, so about part 12, 13, somewhere around there. Definitely worth having a look at if that interests you. All this gardens and menageries, yet no shed for a lawnmower. Lawnmower. How else can the good master keep his lawn trimmed? That's a very good question. I remember that we used to have a lawnmower that was effectively exactly the same design as from the 1800s, way before all these electric things and petrol things popped up. You mean a servant who mows the lawn? Absolutely. Honestly, if someone came in and said griffins were chaos species in our world, I would be hard-pressed to deny it. A giraffe, sorry, were a chaos species. Exactly. And I think that that's a really interesting point for the Warhammer world, because it is, after all, a truly weird animal. And I think there's definitely a lot that can be discussed there in terms of how the Warhammer world perceives species like demogryphs, something that we in our world look at and go, well, that's crazy. That must be a chaos thing. Yeah. Where in their world, it's just one of the many species that are out there. I guess it might have a beak and paws, and it might almost be a hybrid of different species in terms of how we understand it. I mean, them as well. But they live in a world where these things are normal. So yeah, totally. It would be a thing. Rogan says he gads the masterworks and now must put together a fine trimmer. Quite. What is the elite? I'll get paying them for. You know, I'm now beginning to think that because we've already got an engineer in the city, that there could be something fun with an almost steam-driven, half-broken. Oh no, I quite like the idea of the steam-driven lawnmower that they've got, working like some sort of bizarre blackened combine harvester that they always try to wheel out when important dignitaries are there to show the engineering peaks that the empire can achieve. They are, after all, the pinnacle of engineering in the old world and elsewhere. But it's actually deeply rubbish and is only brought out for those occasions and is in fact terrible. I think there's something in that, particularly a couple of fun adventure hoots could be built around that one. There should be an aviary, Andy. There is one. It's that big thing sitting in the middle here. Given the connection with spies and pigeons, a dovecot aviary. Oh, that's a slightly different thing. There are spies, but they're mostly up on the heavy hills. But I agree. But we've got our aviary in already. Andy Law advocating for putting giraffes to the torch. Well, you said it, I didn't. Martin, they're lovely creatures, though. There's some in Edinburgh Zoo, and I love them. A horde of giant snails. See, that's another thing. There are truly enormous snails in the Warhammer world to go for all of the crazy things you can. Obviously, they're often tied through to Britonia because, after all, there's an English writer. They're automatically going to go for the French people have snails stereotype. But there are enormous, huge snails there, some of which are over 6 to 9 foot tall in terms of their shells. And I'm sure that those things could be hollowed out and lived in by certain peasants. That's something you won't see in your average Bretonian army list. Yeah, that sounds like Pete Warhammer Yank. I love it. Yeah, me too. Now, think about what she said. Witch hunters to investigate the Avatar: The Last Airbender universe. Oh, there are so many in there. And you're not wrong. Although I love Avatar, so don't you dare kill it. Or Mechanical Lawnmower, it's actually got 3 halflings in it with sides. Yeah, that'd be a good example of a fake, and I'm not actually against that in terms of them attempting to appear that they've got things that they don't necessarily have. Right, let's finish off this. We didn't have anything added for the menagerie itself, so I'm just going to come in, fill this up with some vaguely on the wrong layer. Let's move up to the lines layer. Some vaguely cage-shaped areas of different sizes, and we can worry about exactly what's in them later. And with later and the write-up, we might change a couple of the locations, as is often the case when you write something up. I'm going to heavy off the line slightly. As is frequently indeed mentioned in the tutorial I did for this sort of map style, it's not difficult. It is basically, as Lindsay often mentions, just drawing lots and lots of boxes. It isn't something that's particularly difficult to do. I'll leave some of these open to give the idea that there's creatures in there that can't climb too high or fly. Cut a couple of those in two. Oh yeah, another creature has been sent to us from the other side of the world. Here's another parrot. Here's another bird. Here's another monkey-like creature. On that, here's something for you Warhammery fans to ponder as I make my way around here. Often you see things like rat men or beast men or this man or that man in Warhammer. But because the writers are so human, we are human after all, they rarely consider how humans are perceived by the rest of the various species of the Warhammer world. Would there be anyone out there that, for example, just referred to them, and I don't just mean in the Eldar way with their Monkey, but just as ape men? Because beyond the weirdness of it all, it's pretty much what we are, all of us. And we don't discuss that because obviously we always view it from a humanocentric position. What do the Skaven think of us, for example? Do they think of us there as ape rats, for example, rather than their position, our position? It's always rat men, as if man is the standard. And it really isn't. So there's a stupid thing for you to consider. It's truly stupid. Don't think about it too deeply. Right. Sort of happy where this is going. I'm going to add a little bit of texture and more in a moment, but this is going to be pretty much all I'm going to do for this section. If through write-up we end up needing a little bit more space for certain things, we can just add that as required. I know that there was quite a lot of discussion in one of the previous streams about some of the things that were going to be in the menagerie. I have completely forgotten all of that. So if anyone does run through one of the previous streams and find something that there's not space for in here or has been missed, let's bring it up in a future stream and we will fill that in. Okay, right, so that's that area largely done. Have we had any other mazes thrown in our direction? So far, we have one. We've got the maze there from Rogan. Thanks very much. So I quite like that. So we've got a round one. We don't have any particular symbols or iconography worked into that. If anyone's over in Discord and having a check of it, do you think there's anything else that could be potentially added to this or played with this? Does anyone have any other ideas for it, or are we happy with how that looks as it currently stands? While we're doing that, I'll check the comments. Give them a panda. I think that's not a bad idea. I do love a panda, and indeed various other things from over there. Is there any kind of trophy room to display epic past exploits of the Holzkrugs? Yes, maybe some large stuffed animals, or Gorgon, similar stuff. Yeah, we've got quite a lot of those, not just trophies. We've got large avenues of statues. We've got entire areas marked out in the State Army barracks for basically celebrating the great victories of the past. So yes, there are a bunch around. Humans are just 8 beastmen, as you said. They pretty much are, aren't they? But we don't think of them like that because we are the base standard, aren't we? Yeah, mayflies and lumberfoots. And I quite like Carillion. In fact, I quite like Carillion a lot. One of the things when I was drawing the picture of Alemenowite, the first one that we did was Alemenowite, as has come out in the stream, is under a spell, a pretty powerful spell that makes her appear somewhat more human and somewhat more acceptable to the humans. And I've done my first elf as one of the pictures that sits on Alemenowite's Tales of Altdorf City, in fact. And that particular elf looks quite different to her. And perhaps under the glamour, that's what she looks like. But that all aside, I like Carillion just in general. And yes, she does, because she's constantly insulting them because, you know, they die. It's an easy thing to say, isn't it? Mayflies. Now, here's a real question. Have you... Oh, God damn it. Maze is like 80%. Oh, no, Codley's coming in with one as well. So I'll wait for your one to go before I go and see if we can do a combination of the two, take the best of both. We'll see. Jenks goes. Why was I thinking of Harim? I don't even know to know why you're going down that line. Observation tower for smug folk to watch others get lost in the maze. Like that. I do like any reason for a noble to feel smug should be in there. So we know the hedge maze is going to be here. I'm just going to have a quick check for what it looks like. This was one that I particularly like. There's a maze up in one of the large theme parks in the middle of the Highlands. And it has exactly that, a large wooden raised platform. Its maze, though, is super easy. It's just raised wooden platforms, and you can just hop off one platform and go up on the other side if you don't want to run around the wooden maze that's already built. But it's surprisingly complex for how relatively small it is. And the platform's great because they also use it for games to call out to people which direction they should be going in, which is quite a lot of fun. So I am going to definitely include one approximately here-ish, because that is too much fun for its own good. And I kind of love it. Love it a lot, in fact. Right, so let's go check the rest of the comments before I start working on that. I'm missing a bit, so no secret passage or trapdoor. Running into there, well, we don't, at this scale, we don't necessarily need to draw it, because you wouldn't. Now, is there one in your version of Kalegen? If you want it, absolutely yes. The map of this scale, we couldn't show it anyway, but I see no reason that there wouldn't be one. Lore Master Deck said, which channel do we check the maze in? I'd like to take a peek. Andy's already replied to that. I was just about to do a ping. So if you check where Andy's just pinged you inside the server over on our Discord, you should be able to find it. Oscar says, I love the banter between Uber's Rank 5. Yeah, me too. The voice actors got on the spot on that. Indeed. The Uber's Rank 5 were going to be within the enemy within, or at least 3 of them were going to be within, 2 of them. 3 of them. 3 of them were going to be in the enemy within, because I love Fat Shark and I was speaking to them all the time, and they provided so much help during the Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay starter set. And Graham had worked with Fat Shark for a couple of things as well. Unfortunately, obviously, I left, so that didn't come to pass. Carillion was going to be in there. That was going to be quite fun. There was going to be some, yeah, that didn't happen, so let's not get too dwelly on it. Tagged in Discord, yes, you are. Heron says, and a slightly higher observation tower next to it, so the nobler noblers look down smuggling others. Oh, that's made me laugh. I quite like that. So maybe if we go for ourselves, something with a large swan beak at the front, wings going up to either side. They'll curl around like so. So we can definitely get the swan iconography in. We can get ourselves a raised section off to one side and a raised section off to the other side, allowing them to play games or some equivalent within the maze. And all the gathered onlookers can make their way up said tower, up towards the top. Yeah, quite like that. So we've actually got ourselves a triumvirate of locations that you can sit on, with the big beak sticking out towards the front for the swan. Swan's got a rounded beak, Andrew, sitting towards the front of it. I quite like that. And there'll be a bunch of lenses and such like at the top, I presume, for them to peer down upon the poor unfortunates, which means that we're going to have ourselves a path that leads out along and into this area, at the very least, wide at the point when it connects. And then you'll be able to go around this towards the maze itself. Yeah, quite like that. Okay, we're definitely getting an idea of what this place is going to look like in terms of that. Let's see if there's any other comments before I dive in. Telescope and the crown of the swan for spying the maze gorge. Yeah, I absolutely agree. In fact, so one possibly you can even sit inside the head of it and look out from its eyes, because that's kind of cool. We obviously that. Yeah, too small for the map. I absolutely agree. Far too small for the map, but it's cool for the location. In fact, I absolutely love it. Yeah, now. Oh, we've got ourselves a second map. It's just arrived from Hawk Audley with a Sigmar twin-tailed comet maze. Huh. Someone's pulling out all the stops. I love it. Now, have you tested out your maze? If you can drop up a comment to tell me if you've tested it out before I look at it. Is it nice and clear? Is there a way into each section? Does it work its way around? I love the idea of this. It's kind of cool. And let's see if we can get the bits and pieces from each of them and build it out. But I will ask if you've done that. That would be cool. Heron then drops in an event where rival nobles pluck some commoners from the streets and have them race through the maze for entertainment and gambling. Yes. Yes. Absolutely. That's just fun. Like ferret racing on a grand scale. Maybe even have them all dressed up as different animals. And they get offered quite an amount of cash, actually. So whoever wins will get themselves, a decent amount of cash, a couple of gold crowns or something. That's a reason to try and get into it, to want to actually be involved with it. And they all get themselves like a big mask on, so that they can be identified. Perhaps they all have a big flag sticking out their back so that everyone can watch where they're going to, so they can be seen nice and clearly as they're running around all over the place with a flag fluttering. That's all kinds of cool. I kind of love that. So I can see them all running around. The problem with that is, obviously, there's going to be a fixed route that makes its way through. So perhaps we can add in its description, if not in the version that we actually build, but in its description, that there is a variety of changes made to the maze, maybe once every month or so, where bits are grown in, maybe other bits are hacked out, so that the maze will change for each one of its yearly events. And perhaps it's been going on now since, I don't know, since the walls were first expanded, the parts. So it's going to be at least 20 years. So we've got ourselves a bit of a build-up. Maybe there's some local champions who have won the maze and have been celebrated because of this. Perhaps the local champions also get themselves offered a job if they want on staff somewhere. There could be all sorts of crazy stuff in there. I love it. So the map is solvable. Excellent. Great. Thank you very much for confirming that, Andy. It's also badass. Yeah, I agree. Anything that's got gigantic comment in it deserves a mention. Tommy goes, would they have Gwent in the Empire? So this is something that I discussed behind the scenes, because I was a big Gwent player back in the past. No longer am, although I still have an account somewhere. I kind of love Gwent. Lots of fun. And my ultimate answer to that was that I received probably not. But I wanted to incorporate some of it. So I started pushing in that direction. In Rough Nights and Hard Days, we will find the Tarok games are mentioned on more than one occasion. And some of those Tarok decks are entirely unique. And that's the first step towards creating some version of a game that is more than just we're playing cards, but is, for example, a game of Warhammer using cards, for example. Yeah, that's kind of fun. So Hawk Audley, I'm going to pop out one of his comments from this side. I'm going to bring it up as a comment and directly pop it in, because I can. Yes, the maze can be entered from both north and south entrance, and you can reach the center of the comet. The two small areas inside the symbol that don't have mazes are, in my head, like garden picnic areas. I quite like this. I don't want to diss Rogan's one. So if you're out there, Rogan, well, because we're all talking about the other one, I don't want to diss your one, but we do have a Comet of Sigma in this one, and I quite like that. But I'm going to go back to your one and drop out the bits that you've got there. So you've got private lounges dropping down in one corner. I say that we do that too. We've got our palatial garden sitting at the top, so something that's rather pretty for people to promenade through. Big, wide dresses, and nobles moving their way around certain places. I love that, where perhaps a meeting area in the center. I love that too. So why don't we combine the two? I'm not sure I want a greenhouse on this side. I think I'm going to put the greenhouse over on the other side, but I think I agree that we want a greenhouse. So I'm going to take combinations of both. So let's first grab let me zoom out slightly. Let's see if that's going to go. Control V. Are you going to go? No, it wants me to open it. Excuse me while I go grab this picture from over here. Copy image. And then drop it in here. Let's see how big his... Wow, that's a big maze. I've got a feeling that's slightly bigger than we need. Let me just resize that down a little bit to about that. That'll do. Let's bring that over and have a look at that where it sits. I quite like that. I'm going to make it a little bit smaller. I'm also going to leave the observation tower where we've got on R1. So we're looking at about that size. Are we all liking the look of that? It's pretty decent. I'm going to drop down the opacity on that slightly. I'm just going to multiply that. Oh no, I'm going to leave it as it was, make the darken. And then I'm going to drop down the opacity a bit. Okay, cool. So I think that's actually looking pretty decent for where it sits. I'm going to add down in this corner, the suggestions from Rogan, assuming I'm saying your name right and it's not Rogan or something. I'm going to drop out our private area, and I'm going to go onto my line area, drop that about here. About there, yeah, that'll do. I'll not put the greenhouse in, but I will have this entire section up here be dedicated to gardens. I'll just edge it with a line so that we know we're going to do that. And we'll have a main road coming out from there and arcing towards the entrance way in as well. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that as a general shape. Rogan also suggested paths around the back, which I think are a good idea, connecting the areas. I'll put the paths in a moment. And a greenhouse. And I'm going to put the greenhouse that Rogan suggests over on this side, probably over here-ish. I'm just going to mark it there and put a GH on it. In fact, no, I'll forget, because if I don't do that part today, by next week I'll have forgotten what I was doing. Thanks, COVID. Okay, so just mark that there, and then let's have a look at this. Now, I've got already a tree layer, which I'm going to pull out, and I'm going to use for marking the edges of my forest. And where is my legacy brushes? There they are. And where is my old forest brush? I'm just going to use that to make life easy. There it is. And let's make that only size 2, I think. Even that's too big. By size 1. And if that's too big, I'm just going to use a different brush entirely. It gives you the idea of that edge, but I think that might be too dark when I put it beside another one, like so. I might need a new layer to do that, because that's once I take the yeah, that's going to be mucky, so I'm not going to do that. I will instead just get a new layer, check what that looks like with a new layer. Yeah, that's what I thought. I'm going to copy that layer style, paste that layer style. I'm going to get rid of the drop shadow. I'm going to get rid of the outer glow, keep my stroke, keep my inner glow, no, I'm not going to get rid of that. And let's see what that looks like. It's a bit stark, but I can tidy it out afterwards. So I'll use that to start it all off, and then we'll tidy it up after. So let's get on to my layer, and nope, on the wrong one, that layer. There we go, now just mark the edges. This will give it a good starting point that's a bit brushy. I think I'm going to need to increase the opacity so I can see the lines that were suggested on that a bit better. Yeah, that's better. Let's get back to my lines. Right, so I'm going to go right to the corner here. Get the right. Because we don't have the observation tower where it was suggested. We'll fill that in a moment. And go over there as well. And then make my way all the way down here. Now, can you access these parts at the back? Yes, you can. Excellent. Again, thanks very much for the complicated maze there. Hugely appreciated. I do love a maze, eh? They are amazing. Oh, dear. Right, so I'm going to slowly but surely work my way through all of this. I'm not sure how I'm going to mark in the edge of the comet. Do I want that just to come across as if it's... Yeah, I do. So I'm going to actually just mark that in as if with hedgerow as well. I don't want it to be an actual built-in thing. I want it all to be hedgerow because that's more fun. That means that we're going to have a dead end there, which I'm going to instead pull in like so. I love it. That was a really nice idea, Hawk. Thank you very much for that. You rock. I am going to just follow your maze because it means I don't need to think. And then I will tone it down a little bit and then draw over it as I bring in all the rest of the elements. So, right. So if anyone's got any other things they think should be on this section, do drop it into the comments now and I will get to it once I've gone through the first sections of building this. I quite like this, just as an idea. It's just quite fun. Who doesn't like a maze, eh? But that's a little bit too... We just increase the... Not down. Oi, 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 do I tell you? Thank you. Increase the space, decrease the spacing slightly. That's a bit better. Still not doing what I want, but it's a bit better. No, decrease it further. Yeah, that's better. Quite liked your idea of there being a couple of places where you can just eat in the middle. Hawk, I think that's got quite a lot of character. Let's just twist that all the way around. Yep, love it, just as an idea. See a nice little shrine sitting in the middle here as well. That would be quite fun. It's a little bit heavy-handed there. Is that a dead end? Yes, it is. That's just still scratching just a little bit more than I'd like. Let's try that. That's a bit better. I can do it much faster this way. That's better. There we go. That was all running too slow. Let's get through this quickly because I want to get on to the next bits. Dun, 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 dun. Flick. Flick. Meow.
let's leave that open so that they can get into that section. Pardon for the long, boring section as we make our way through here. We're almost there. The second I've done over every line, I'll jump into the comments again. We are almost there. But I'm glad that we've got ourselves a relatively complicated one because that's just a bit more fun. I think it's going to look the better for it. Yep, that still works. As does that. I'm going to simplify that one a bit and simplify that one. Close it off there. That still works. That still connects. That still connects. We're good. Right. Let's finish off these last little bits. And then shunk, 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 shunk. I don't know why apps go shunk, but today apparently they do. Excellent. Let's get rid of the underpinning picture. Love it. I'm going to tone that down slightly and then use my other brush to draw over where I want my actual lines. But that'll be my underlying bit. Love it. So again, thank you very much for the shape of that. Marvelous idea. I love it. Let's quickly run through my comments before we pass on to the next bit. Right. So, right. I think that's where we are. Here we go. Fountains may be handy in the lounging bits. I think that's a fine idea. Again, with the Swamp theme. Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons why it works so well. Or Master drops in. Those pens can be wandering through that maze for a long time. Hell, it took us ages just to put the basics of it in place. Rogan says, no offense taken. I can draw like a mouse with a mouse. Yeah. The Bretonian book for Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 2nd edition has got some maps in it. Those maps that I did in there were all done with a mouse. Do not recommend. The freaking worst. It was the same for the Moussalon book because my Wacom pad at the time had died. It was the worst. What is an empire-sized city but huge? What is an empire-sized city but a huge maze? Well, no, that's fair. Misunderstood what you're saying there to begin with. A hammer on the southeast garden area side of the symbol. I realize I forgot to make an actual entrance to it. It's okay. I've made some form of entrance to that section. What are some of the empire nobles would do at big parties aside from drinking and politicking? So this is really, they're people. Now, obviously, nobles have got great privileges, and with these great privileges come a variety of pressures and also a variety of advantages and freedoms. What do they do at a party? The same thing that any people do at a party, particularly if they're powerful. Think of any social gathering that you see in the real world where lots of rich people get together, and that's what you're going to see happening. Alcohol, sex, drugs, fun, depressed people, shouting, screaming, laughter, horror, games of various sorts, people trying to impress other people, lots of people trying to impress other people, whether it's to try and get something out of them or otherwise. There is pretty much always a bigger fish in one of these things. So almost everybody who's going to be at one of these things is going to be chasing something, wanting something out of it. And whilst it's very easy just to say that's drinking and politicking, it's more than that in many respects. It's their very lives will change if they can manage to land the right sort of, let's say, patron at these sorts of events. So you tend to find there's a lot of relatively desperate people as well. And representing that if you're ever playing something in one of these environments it's obviously a good idea. Right, so I'm going to quickly run over this, but I've got a few other comments before I go on. Heron says, we're going to have a garden hermit and stallion mystic who was on. Yes, we were going to have a garden mystic. That's a good point. And I actually prefer that maybe to the Ryan, particularly because it enhances the Estalian nature of much of this family. Someone who's come down from one of the Estalian kingdoms. Yeah, I think I actually prefer that. Expanding the swan fountains, always a good idea. Issues with maintaining water pressure leads to spitting swans, gurgling goose, and drowning duck statues. Love it. Well, Master Sodic, that's by the way, next time we chat, I hope you're ready for my ranting about the Nagash series. I finished the first book. Oh boy, I have opinions. Oh boy. Yeah, I imagine that there's going to be some opinions when I read it too. Luke Shonky, I'm assuming that you mean the map in general. It ain't done yet. Can't wait for Birdie to try and navigate this maze. No, me neither. She'll look over the top. Yeah, she will. Is there a role-playing software where you can build 3D cities? There almost certainly is. I don't know what it is because I just build whatever I want in Photoshop. Full of debauchery nobles of Slaneshi cults. Slaneshi cults do go hand in hand with nobles all over the place. Of that, there is no doubt. And indeed, they are a central component to many of the presentations of nobles, and not just the literature, but in various books about chaos too. So they should always be there. But I would say that I am always very careful and cagey using what is often just people having fun, having sex, getting together and just doing what humans do, and somehow saying that that is chaos. It to me speaks of a prudish nature that I just kind of don't like. It makes me feel sort of uncomfortable whenever something comes up where people are getting together and having a bit of fun. Immediately, chaos. It's not like that. It's one of the reasons why we put so much extra focus on Raya inside the core rulebook, to ensure that there was a sex positive, not just goddess, but anything inside the book, to show that sex and its various trappings were not just the province of the dark gods, which frankly is awful in terms of a presentation. It's one of the reasons why Katja was given so much space inside the starter set, for example. She is a goddess of sex workers, amongst many other things as well. And that was also important to put forward. So I completely agree with everything you're saying there, Tommy, but I'm also going to add that I'm always a touch cagey with it in terms of exactly where to present it. Okay, so why not both? Between the Stallion and the Ryan, opportunities for rivalries. That's not a bad idea. Yeah, it's not a bad idea. We'll worry about that when we get over to the other side. It was because you went. Oh yeah, sure. No, I did, didn't I? I'd forgotten. The palace is quite new, but could have a room and there's a lost spirit wandering in there. Yeah, lost spirits are. I will say yes if you can come up with a good story for why there would be one there that's perhaps a bit older and is super cool. I don't think that's a bad idea. French Unicorn comes in and says, speaking of nobles, one of my players is that career. Great. What would a noble do to earn money aside from managing estates? Receiving it as a stipend from their parents or from their family in general. That's often the easiest ways to resolve that. There's lots of other potential ways, but don't think of it in the same way that our capitalist society often considers these things. These people have so much money from their various estates et al. That they often just receive it. They just get given it. They have it. They are privileged. And that's a good way to go. The important bit about Slanesh is that he's supposed to be about excess, not just sex. And I won't say he either, not for them. I'm more of a them for Slanesh. Not just sex and generally living life. True excess is in the sense of depravity and the cost of others on oneself. Exactly. It's going too far. And it's very easy to tie that through to the nobles because they have such an indolent lifestyle. At least some of them do. Those who are perhaps not engaged with warfare or engaged with X, Y, or Z across the empire. And they are they have all of the opportunities to lose themselves into this realm of hedonism, which is one of the reasons, I mean, the Slanesh cults do very strongly represent in the nobility of that. There is no doubt. I just added that extra layer of caginess to make sure that it was at least considered. Hulk Ugly adds, how's then going? It's not for me. Love Epicure, me too. Or Flagellants, me too. I mean, there's so many different ways that Slanesh can manifest. How about a swan-shaped planting bed in the garden? I'm not against that. If you're up for trying to give me a good shape for that, do feel free to drop that into our Kalegen stream over on Discord, where we have already had one gigantic maze added. Right, let's just double check I've got the right brush. I do not. Let's get the correct brush. It's that size 4. My gosh, that's actually quite thick. Let's edge this. and get this into place. And we have such, and that's going to be the edge of the, there we go. I'm tempted to have statues around the edge of this to ground it all into place, because that seems kind of fun. So we can but on possibly the one side only, because they're attempting to impress. They're giving the suggestion that it's on all sides where it actually isn't. That seems very Hall's Crew. A little bit down that side as well, to ensure. And we're just going to leave that as very loose. We're not going to put any particular detail on that. A couple of little squiggles, and that'll do. We know what it's about. When we do ourselves a description of the maze for its write-up, we can drop that the outside on 3 of the sides are covered with statues that overlook and loom. I'll do in the detailing for all of this hedge work later, purely because I'm not wanting to get caught up with this entire stream just working through bits of hedge. It is, after all, not the most exciting thing to watch being put into place. But I definitely think that we have ourselves a strong, I'd go further, we've got a very strong shape for how this is going to work. I really quite love this. It was a good idea, and it really does feel like it's pulling the entire palace into a nice place. We can put some lovely gardens around the edge of that. Let's get ourselves some roads on so we can see where they sit. So I'm going to go over to my road layer, which is its own layer. I'm going to get a nice clean brush that I can brush with. Let's go just hard round. That's way too big. And let's layer in our roads now. The roads are just going to stand in place for all of our primary paths that lead up to and around. And then I'll get rid of the line work that I put in place and reestablish it with something else. Yeah, I kind of love that. Definitely see how that's going to work. Yeah, okay, cool. We can go over towards the main walls there of the main path outside that building. It'll connect through to there. It'll go through the back. Connect through to there. Get all our path in around there. Through the menagerie, which is all going to be beaten down gravel probably. That they can crunch their way across as they view the various animals that are kept at the back and the quagga or whatever else that they happen to have in their menagerie. Let's loose its various weird calls. We can have that going right up to grass. Have ourselves the central area that I said would be there. Spiral out for each of the garden parts. And in classic fashion, let's have that go out in 8 directions. I'm also going to get rid of the, oops, almost moved the road there. Get that and remove the external lines so that we can see how it all connects together a bit more cleanly. Yeah, like that. Have you got any other ideas for anything that could be in this section? If you drop those into the comments now, I'm about to dive into the comments and we'll go through them and chat it all out. If there's anything else that should go here. Yeah, okay, yeah, I'm seeing how that's going. Let's get back to the roads and finish off this little bit of road. Let's have that run down the back. Like so. Let's have one run along the back of there as well. That's our nice little area where everyone can gather on the other side. Might want to have a pool as well as a fountain in there. Yeah, we have that go straight across. That goes straight across. A couple of smaller gardens here. Let's actually just fill that in so that the entire area is clear. That means we can fill that one in too. And we can turn this into another minor garden at the side. Put the grass into either side. Some hedge rows and similar in there. Okay, I think I've got a good idea of some basic shapes for this. If anyone else any other ideas, now is the time to throw it up. I can kind of see how that's all falling together now, though. Let's go take a check at everything else. Swan-shaped floral clock. Do love a floral clock, another engineering horticultural marvel. Yeah, I do like that. In fact, why don't we have that sitting over at the other side over here so that those who are looking here can go right across and see the awesome clock. That also allows them, when they're doing their games, to have countdowns. So when they say when the big hand reaches the bottom, everyone's got to have got to the center or done some other funky thing. I really like that. So that, I think, works really well there. Great idea, Andy. I think that this comment can just stand by itself. Nobles. Right, past that. And then the Skaven have made a model of the model of a model down under Kalegen. Now, interesting, Hawk Audley, there is no under Kalegen. And now that might strike people as just utterly crazy. We have discussed this at some length in previous streams, but the Skaven want there to be an under Kalegen and are currently attempting to organize that. There's no great sewer system here. It's a bit of a mess. Things are half in place. There are Skaven influences in a variety of different places, though. So don't think that there are no Skaven. There are. It's just that there are no, as it currently stands, great undercity underneath here. This was the tiniest of villages until around about 30 years ago. This is a massive, swift, and new expansion by humanity, and the Skaven have yet to properly ground themselves beneath it. Hey, Andy is live. He is. The Curse of 13. Great to see you here. Accidental Union flag alert. Yeah, it's a little bit, isn't it? Kind of happens. Almost looks like CIS 5 Star Wars. It does a little bit too. You're right. I'm sure once it's all filled in, it'll look less like that. The Garden of Moor is fairly close. It is. Could we have been moved from here a very long time ago for some reasons? Works on taint. Some of the tombs missing. Spirit still lingers. So the Garden of Moor is quite far from here. It's easy to say it's close, but we're talking a good 100, 150, 200 yards between the two of them. But this could easily have been like an older barrow or something similar that's underneath one of these. Not against the idea. We get a good story for that. Quite like it. Rogan comes in and says the private Game of Thrones walking garden section could be enclosed with a wall, making it only accessible through the maze to enhance scheming and plotting. I quite like parts of that too. That's nice. Yes, love it. High five. So maybe some certain Skaven slave could help start the process. Are we talking about for building the under... if we're talking about building under Kalegen, there is various forays down in the south of the city with attempt to do that. There's a bunch of children that actually work for the Skaven. Strongly recommend you go check some of our previous streams because by golly is there some funky ideas in there. But the Skaven are very much part and parcel of those. Lord Master of Skolotech goes, oh no, Andy skipped all of our model meme comments. It's so true. Andy, what software do you use to make the overworked view of your maps? If we're just talking about this, what I'm drawing, this is Photoshop. I'm using Photoshop, nothing but Photoshop. I'd love to say that I'm doing something bigger or clever. I am not. It is that simple. It's an old piece of software that I've been using for so long now that I find the idea of using something else very difficult. Let me just fill in our green areas here. Where we're going to have ourselves some gardens, some bushes, some various other things. I will make that make a bit more sense in just a moment. There's also a little bit at the bottom there. That is a little internal garden, which I'm going to drop in. There's also one over here. Just turn those green while I'm at it. It's already beginning to look more like a real place. Do we want to have this as a grass path making our way through our maze, or do we want to have it as graveled all the way through it? What do we think individually on this one? Is grass better? Is gravel better? Anything else? I'm going to pronounce it wrong, aren't I? Bararabu. Love it. Maps are cool. Thank you for saying so. I do enjoy doing them. And Curse of 13, get it right. I meant when we can see the buildings and the roads, it looks great. Yeah, you're right. Okay, got you. I understand what you're saying. We'll be watching previous Kalegen streams after I've caught up with the current Lawhammer. It's worth saying that there is a lot of them. Some of those Lawhammer streams, those mapping streams are like 5, 6, 7 hours long. Be aware of that. But some of the chat is just superb. Some really good stuff in there. Tommy adds, gravel can't get the lawnmower in there. I think you're right about that one. Gravel for the comment, the rest is grass. That's actually quite nice because it creates 2 different tones and it makes the comet stand out more. I quite like that. In fact, I really like that. So I'm going to fall back on that immediately because it will make, in fact, I'm tempted to even make the circle section a slightly different color. I'll tidy that up in just a moment. In fact, I've gone over the circle section there. Yeah, I think that is a good idea because it provides a clarity to the image that would otherwise be missing. Immediately you can begin to see what it is, and I love that. So let's pop over onto the roads layer and pop in. Well, in fact, I can just do it on that one. Our comet. This brush is way too big. Let me just drop that down in size. There we go. Yeah, immediately you can see the difference that brings. And we can have possibly some of the internal comet paved. So as they get into it, they immediately are aware that they're getting closer to the center. So I'll just put a sort of a brownish color in there to show that it's different. Have I lost a part of the circle there? It looks like I've lost a part of the circle there. Get the green back. Like it should be there. Like so. I think that's better. And possibly that part too. There we go. Yeah, that's a little bit clearer. Love it. Hey, yeah, I got a new complaint. Love it. Okay, let's quickly check the rest of the comments before I move on and pin this in. Gravel, yep. Color for the twin tails. Yeah, I think so. I think that's largely where we are. Real day at work today. I can feel my bed calling. Totally understand, Martin. I totally understand. Where does the name Kalegen come from, Andy? Kalegen, where was it first? I want to say I made it up, but I'm not certain. When did Kalegen first hit a map? It's somewhere around the noughties is the first place that I remember placing it. I'm not certain that I was the first one to do it. I might have notes on that one. It may have come from a Black Library novel. And it may have just been a single name. And it was in the area where the Hallskroogs already ruled. So it was very easy to tie the two together. And as I recall, it was a surprisingly large city on the River Bergen that had previously never been there. And I was like, where the hell am I going to put this? I'll come back to you on that one. It was over 20, I'm going to say almost 20 years ago when I first put this on a map. I'm going to say I love the rate with which you've been pumping out content. Glad to hear that. Can't hope to keep up, but your approach to playing Wildfires. Oh, well, thank you very much for saying so, Kirst. That's really nice. Thank you. We do enjoy ourselves. Where in the Empire is this city? In fact, I can show you immediately. And I do think that is worth doing just so we can see it because I have got, I've got a big, huge chunk of my screen here. Let me get rid of that. Go away, go away, go away. Right, so at the bottom here, we have got ourselves a reference area. Here we go. Let's zoom in. There is a section of my master map. This is my map that I have of the entire empire, ranging from top to bottom, left to right, including every location I ever found in any of Games Workshop's publications. So Altdorf, you can see, is quite clearly off to the side there. Let's put a big circle on that so you can't go wrong. There is, why isn't that not showing? Because I'm on the wrong layer. Pop up here. So there is Altdorf. Oh, there's the River Reik. The Reik goes down there, all the way up there towards Karaberg, which is there, very well up in the city. The River Bergen, which goes up to Bergenhafen, flows that way. And Kalegen is right there, opposite the Baron. And there's some really fun bits where you can see here, we've got the border here with Middenland. And we've got some really fun bits down by the docks where they're taking advantage of how close Middenland is for various tax breaks. as certain parts of the territory are actually on the Middenland side, or alternatively, not on any side because they're on the river. And they lie slightly outside the jurisdiction of House Hallskrug. House Hallskrug is in the Duchy of Hallskrug, which is this entire area here. Goes over that way and then down that side. That's the Duchy of Hallskrug. And Hallskrugberg over here is where the Hallskrugs used to hold court. And they've recently moved over to Kalegen. You can tell they hold court there because there's a big crown on top of it. Keeps things down. Now, the Hallskrugs themselves get most of their wealth from their mines, which go down towards the Weisbruck Canal there, or alternatively, their other canal, which goes directly into Kalegen. And their mines are a source of extraordinary wealth. But beyond that, that gives you at least an idea of where it is. Let me just get rid of my reference area there. Is there a raised section in the centre so people that find it have a nice view? I don't think there necessarily is, because that would make it more difficult for them to fuck around with the maze at different points. I think they'll leave it flat. Pave the comet itself with red brick? Possibly, yes. Although all my roads, much as I mentioned earlier in the stream, all have the same colour to ensure that they're super easy to identify as roads. So that means if you are a player trying to figure out how to get from one side to the city to the other, you can just follow that colour. If I used lots of different colours on it, it would be very difficult to read. We leave the descriptions for colour to the text side of it. So that's where writers come along and say things like, this maze has got red brick all over the comet bit. Oh yeah, that's cool. And the bits on the side, they've got brown brick, and there's green brick, or whatever else they happen to put in, as entire rainbows of bricks suddenly occur. But for the mapping side, this is, of course, meant to be representative of the real version of what Kalegen is. But we can't make it accurate, because if we do, it will be unreadable. For example, the vast majority of the buildings in the Empire, particularly the older parts of the Empire, they're roofs touch at the top. The streets barely see any sunlight. If we just did a picture of that, we'd just be roofs everywhere. Literally everything would be roof. And that would make for a really, really difficult to use map. It might look realistic, but if I wanted to be realistic, I'd also cover it with smoke. In fact, it'd be just easier scattering smoke everywhere and saying, there's the city. Ah, that was easy. But we can't do that. Instead, we have to make the streets nice and clear. This, for example, this area, whoa, I'm on Zoom. Let me go here. This area, whoop, I'm still on the wrong layer. Let me just get onto the crit there. This area here is pretty much slums. That area there, those roofs almost certainly touch. But we didn't do that to ensure that you could see that there was a clear thoroughfare down there. And the thoroughfare at the ground level is relatively wide. You could get two coaches running past each other there. But that obviously is not really the case if you look at it from above. The goal of when you're doing this sort of map is not necessarily to be realistic, it's to be useful, to actually create a map that everybody can use. And that's hopefully what this one is. Right, moving down over to Curse 13. I had to come up with a town name during my Any Within campaign and came up with Gorlitz, nice name, where the party docked their barge prior to entering Wittgendorf. Nice. I was pretty happy with the name. It's a good name. I like it. When do you plan to utilize this town in your game? I'm not going to say anything because at least one of my players are watching. Or at least we're watching if he's moved off. But I ain't saying nothing. Lawhammering, would you say more south would be Castle Drakenhof? Would you say more south would be? I'm not quite sure what you're asking there. Are you saying Castle Drakenhof's more in the south? And the answer is absolutely yes. It's in Sylvania, on the end of a long spur that comes out of the World's Edge Mountains, which has got its own name, this big long spur of rock. And it sort of hangs off this enormous Gothic castle. So that's very, very, very far away from here. If you want it in its grand province, you could say Stirland, but very far away. Is that map available anywhere? My master map, it absolutely isn't. Oh, says Tommy Bravo. I'm going to presume you're eyeing at. See the map. Oh, thank you very much, Tommy. A lot of work went into that. Some gold in the comet would really make it pop. Yeah, absolutely would make it pop, wouldn't it? And when I was looking at it, I was like, I kind of wish that I kind of did that. But I don't think I'm going to, just to keep the colors nice and clear. It'll pop a little bit more when I do a little bit more drawing on. I'm about to do some more drawing on it because I haven't done a lot of drawing this stream. I've done a lot of spratting and chatting. Is there a dwarven section in the city? Is that thing? It isn't. And it's not necessarily just for the biggest cities like Altdorf. The dwarven sections are for wherever there's large expatriate or imperial dwarf populations, and that's sometimes often in places you wouldn't expect, because it's very close to old or fallen holds, or it's close to holds that are still standing, so they've got large dwarven populations. Ubersreich, for example, almost a sixth of that city is dwarf, and that's a huge chunk of one of the largest cities in the Reikland. Altdorf is a massive place to the metal shellac, or whatever they've decided to call it in the most recent book. And that's got whole sections that go down underneath Altdorf as well. Again, I'm not sure whether that was put into the new Altdorf book or not, but it is in other books, so it's definitely there, at least in some parts of the lore. So yes, they are all over the place, but some places just don't have any. This place is far too new. There is not a long-standing tradition with this town and some local dwarven hold, or an ancient dwarven hold. The only dwarves that be here are those that had recently come looking for employment. I love Gothic Castle Dragonfall, don't we all, Undead and Alive? I drew it once for a chap called Steve Saville. Steve Saville was the author of the vampire books for Black Library. And much like I imagine the Nagash books, I'm sure there's going to be people who bring up certain issues with them. Ah, it's happened. Baldur's Gate is downloaded for the Lore Master of Sotek. He will never be seen again. I'll be lucky if we see him for the Nagash stream this Sunday. See you later, Lore Master. My favorite also. Have fun, Lore Master. I agree. Right, let's go finish off this section. So first I'm going to edge it, and then I'm going to add some extra detail to it all. So get on my lines, get my brush, get the correct color. The brush, as I've mentioned multiple times, is in my tutorial. If you want to, oops, wrong color. If you want to duplicate this map and the entire styling that it has is not particularly difficult to do. It may look difficult, but it really is not. It is just a bunch of little lines. So I'm going to mark out loosely where we want our garden to be first. Mark out a central section, which is probably going to be some form of fountain as well. So let's just go down to the road layer now and remove that. And go down to the water layer and pop in some water so that I remember that. Like so. Going back to our lines. So I'm going to go work around all of the garden sections first. I'm then going to add a little bit of extra textural detail for some trees or some similar nonsense. I'm still not going to add in all of the detail around the maze, largely because that's going to take a certain amount of time, and I don't want the stream to be dominated by just doing one single maze. And then I'll go back into the comments. So if there's anything else you think should be in this section, if there's anything you'd like to see inside this set of gardens, this maze, these walkways where the nobles are promenading around and looking at things and being all hoity-toity, if there's anything that you think should be in here, do bring it up now. If you are keen to watch Lore Master of Sotek play Baldur's Gate, now is the time to go. I won't hold it against you. I completely understand. I'm not playing that game yet, and it makes me sad. If you want to see a stream with the, let's call him the Lore Master of Baldur's Gate, we've got one over on Rookery Publications. Go look for the one from Lawrence Schnitt. That was about, I don't know, about like 2 seasons ago, I think. So about a year and a half or so ago when he was on our streams. Go check that out because it's a really good stream. And he has a lot of really cool things to say. He was also the lore master for Elder Scrolls. And he's got a lot to say about organizing the lore, not just for that game, but also for other games. And I really enjoyed the chat that we had with him. Lawrence, as it turned out, was a really cool guy. If you're not sure what that is, just pop a comment in and I'll go find it. It can't be that hard to find. After the stream, I will drop a link into the comments. So if you're watching this video later, wondering what the heck is going on, I will have had that link added to the comments. Right, so I'm going to keep this all, we're almost there. It is a bit of a dull trudge going through lots of little boxy gardens, but we'll get there. Get this into place. This area is going to be an actual pavilion-y type area just off to the side of it. Tidy that up slightly. Now, as I've said multiple times in the tutorial side, the aim for doing maps like this is not to be tidy and precise. In fact, tidy and precise often gives them a look that doesn't look as nice. The lines look too artificial, too fake, too computer generated, and they just don't have the same quality of or tone as pencil lines or rugged lines or any equivalent. So if you are doing a map like this, much like I am right now, don't worry too much about it looking perfect. Worry instead about it looking the way you want. I'm going to add a little bit of blue to that as well. Oops, I'm on the wrong layer. Oh, no, I'm not on the right layer. Why is it making such a big? There we go. And go back to my wall lines. Almost there. Let's just section out these bits. And then we'll make it all look a bit prettier. And then we'll jump into the comments for anything else that we should possibly add to this. This is where my clock's going to be, so let's pop that in now. Yeah, I love it. Oops, I accidentally copied every single line on the map. Let's just get rid of that. Put it away. That was not supposed to happen. Nothing to see here. Right. I think we're almost there. I'm going to turn a part of that green there into a paler green. You're not going to see that, are you? No, you're not. I'm going to have to go really pale for this to be seen. And we can use that for some sort of pitch, for some sport or another, whether that's our equivalent of croquet or anything else. But a flattened area that we can decide exactly what it's for later. Okay, I'm going to add a little bit of texture, a little bit of color, and then we're going to go diving into the comments again. So won't be too long before we're popping into those. Let's take this up to say size 3. Let's see what that looks like. Yeah, pop in some trees at the corner of that one. If you want to know what the heck I'm doing with these trees or how they work, that was also covered in the tutorial that I did for the rookery. So you can learn how to do all of this yourself. It takes very little time. Don't want to do that. Don't want to block off the road there. I want that still to be. There we go. I want it to have that character. I don't want it to hold off. There we go. Let's go for a larger tree there. Let's go for one. Perhaps cover the corners with larger trees too. And love it. One in the center. Tidy those up in just a second while I pop them all in. Let's tidy that up a little. Make sure we can see the roads. As I mentioned before, it's important that we can see all the roads that our PCs or indeed anyone else can make their way along, even if our trees would be overhanging in reality. Truth be told, places like this often look like this. Just big piles of trees that cover absolutely everything, but that doesn't necessarily make for the best looking map. Like the idea of a couple of trees sitting on the outside here, adding a bit of texture. I'm now going to add some, I mean, these places would be full of flower beds. I'm just going to add some base color behind it all, block off a couple of bits, and then jump in the comments. So I'm going to grab, let's say red to begin with. I'm just going to drop in some color on various places to suggest that there's flowers. I'm not doing this particularly carefully. I'll tidy it up with a little Okay, that'll do for at least that. And then I'll just go over those edges with a bit of black. Okay, I'm about to run into the comments again. So if you've got anything you'd want to say, now is the time to bring it up. Now, I'm not doing very much to these. I'm just adding just the idea that there's little bushes, little beds of flowers. I'm not doing a lot of detail. The aim here is not to spend ages drawing each individual little flower box or any equivalent. It's to give the idea that there's some of those things around here, and that there is a gardener who has clearly spent time making parts of the garden look one way or another. The rest of it's left to the imagination of the viewer or the GM who may be using this section of the map as they go, well, that could be that, that could be that, and the description that the text will add, which will help ground it all into some form of reality as firm locations. It is in some respects here to inspire rather than constrain. I'm going to add just a little bit of color on these as well. In fact, I'm not going to go, I'll go to the comments first, and then go check the rest. Okay, so comment-wise, all of the undead, fantastic. Yes, I agree. Curse 13 comes in. You can't touch BG3 till we get home. Sorry, I feel sorry for you. Play it in co-op with your gang and stream it. I'm really thinking of playing it myself. I need a new PC though, so that's the first thing that's on my list. I am almost up to the amount of money that I need for my new PC, but my new PC is going to cost thousands and thousands of pounds. It sucks. But once I've got that, I will probably stream Baldur's Gate, or possibly just start streaming Warhammer every once in a while, that's in Total War, just so that I can finally get to grips with the game. Nothing in Warhammer Imperial Architecture is tidy or precise anyway. Completely agree. Justin, hi Justin, also comes in, big fan, maybe a big statue fountain in my home, Heidelberg, lovely place. There is the Vater Rhine, am I pronouncing that correctly? Would it be Vater Rhine? I'm not sure. Fountain looks like this. I sadly can't use links there, but I might be able to copy it. Let's see if I can. I cannot. That's rather annoying. So I sadly can't use your link to go and have a check. If you want to post any links to us to have a look at, if you drop into our Discord channel, we have a channel that's laid out just for Kalegen stuff. Drop in there and make a quick post, and we can hopefully see it there. If you want if you don't have access to our Discord channel already, dive over into the description on YouTube and you'll find a link down there. If you're watching you're watching on Twitch. Marvelous. If you're watching on Twitch, then pop over to YouTube and type in Lawhammering and you'll find us. And then live, perfect, I agree. What kind of sports will they have in Modern Fantasy? They use as a pitch. Well, you've obviously got midden ball. We've got a couple of midden ball pitches already in here. We're going to have one midden ball pitch up here so that some of the nobles can play a bit of midder, don't you know? Of course, got to play a bit midder. So they will have one. But we were discussing various other types of sports, and we haven't pinned down which ones we definitely want to have in here yet. Make a grandfather right statue. We already have a huge grandfather right temple sitting. Oh, I've gone too far down. Over here. In fact, you might be able to see it. It's a massive temple of Grandfather Reich, literally holding the temple on his back like that, with his beard flowing down into the water, which is just too awesome for its own good. So yeah, we definitely have that. Bubble, well, that's the equivalent of midden ball. Midden ball, indeed, uses a pitch. It does indeed, Curse of 13. Overboard then adds, all 5 of my limited edition enemy within sets are on their way. Marvelous. I can't wait to do a ton of reading very soon. Very excited to learn about the Warhammer Fantasy roleplay setting. Good luck with it all. Depending on what you have, I recommend the core book as well and the starter set if you don't have those already. Starter set is full of useful goodies. Damn, Overboard, big money. I know. It's a lot of money, isn't it, Overboard? I've already looked through the PDFs, but I like reading physical books, as do we all. Those tarot card covers look stunning, by the way. They were originally my idea. The tarot cards that were used are not the plans that I originally put in place, but it's nice to see that they've executed them. I tend to go overboard on things. Don't we all? Agreed. Nothing beats a book in hand. I agree, especially hardbound. Yes, I agree. I wish you fair health. Thank you. Can't wait for tomorrow's sessions. Neither can I. Good luck with the rest of the stream. Thanks. I have a bunch of Cubicle 7 products, everything from Wrath and Glory, New Imperial Maledictum, and back the new Broken Weave setting. I'm sure it'll be marvelous. Father Rhine, indeed. Very similar idea. Well, hammering, currently playing a Boris Torbanger campaign in, oh, excellent, and listening to you. That's a nice combo. I approve. Oh, speaking of sports, do dwarves have sports or is it just drinking? Damn straight they do, or at least they do in my world. The idea that dwarves wouldn't have sports to me is actually crazy. So yes, as to what they are, I have still to decide exactly how they're going to manifest in my game, but they are going to manifest. Right, do I have... I'm now going to add the detailing for our maze to give it that little bit of edging. I said I wasn't going to do it, but I just want to see what it all looks like. Now, our maze doesn't obviously have to be perfect in that it doesn't have to be one that everyone can figure out how to get through. Because when people play, they tend to ignore these little things anyway, but some people don't, so it's good to make sure that it does make sense, that is. Again, thanks. Huge thanks goes out to Hawk for sending over the maze plan in our Discord server. That was sent over earlier in the stream. Has made quite a difference to making this place look like it's a bit more Empire. It's sometimes difficult when you're just dealing with lots and lots of boxes seen from above to make things look like that they come from the culture or the setting realms that might be in place. And it's details like this that really help bring a place into not just life, but life within the setting at hand. When I was doing the maps for Critical Role, I had a similar issue in that much of what they were describing in the text was absolutely gorgeous, but there was no way for me to depict that on a huge scale city map. So we came up with a variety of little extra things that we could do to try and ensure that the character for those locations was still maintained. And I'm told I did all right with that, so I'm going to take their word for it because it's their setting. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, I definitely think doing this was worthwhile because it's just added just that extra layer of character to this. I'll tidy up a little bit again afterwards, but I think that we definitely have a rather funky looking map building here. I can imagine them wandering around down here, making their way through all the twists and the turns. It's quite a large one. It doesn't look like it'd be that hard to get to the center from above, but as is often the case with these maps, you think that, as in these mazes, you think that, and then you get stuck in one trying to work your way through it, and you suddenly realize it's not so... There needs to be a way through there. It's not so easy when you're actually in it in comparison to being on the top looking down, or indeed in the overlooking tower looking into it. I need to make a break there too. Right. Okay. That's this at least done for the moment. I'm now going to add some color to the buildings that we've got around here so that we can make this place look a little bit more finished on this side. Once I've added the color to these buildings, I'm going to... Here we go, building color. Let's get a nice big brush. Go back to the comments again. So let's get a relatively large one and just start popping it in. Now, as we've said earlier in the stream, all of our buildings, unless they're locations that are going to get a write-up and go onto our World Anvil account, are done in brown. As you can see, if I move down over here, brown for main buildings. All of our buildings that are going to get a full write-up go in purple, and I'll do a couple of these as purple because clearly they're going to get write-ups, like, for example, the clock tower. The tower that overlooks the maze, that'll be the maze write-up as well. There we go. Let's see, what do we have in terms of buildings here? We've got our tower there. We've got a second tower here. And let's pop in the main details here. Now, obviously, many of these locations, the menagerie is going to get all purpled. Of that, there's no doubt. So I'm just going to not even bother doing that in purple. And that's also going to be purple. I'm just going to move over to the purple location color now. Let's pop those in purple now. So before I highlight and shade our locations, do I want that? No, I want them to be brown. I want this location to be purple. I want my clock tower to be purple. Love it. I don't want any of those to be purple. They're just the basic wing. I want my menagerie to be purple at the back. That's probably a little bit too thick a brush to do this. I'm going to go out the lines. Oh no. There we go. There's our Eyrie that's going to be inside our menagerie at the back. Holzkrug Zoo. Nice little building there. Cages there. Cages here. Turn them all. Just tidy up my. Oh, wow. I'm really going out the lines. And then this bit section here. Right. So we've got the big ballroom that we want to have highlighted in purple, which I'm going to mark in here. We've discussed that a couple of times earlier in the stream. Definitely want that pulled out. Wizard's Tower over to this side, which we definitely want pulled out as well. There's bound to be other parts here that I'm going to want to do that. Purple out too, but I think this is a good start. So now I'm going to just get all of these buildings in brown, and then we can get back to the comments. Nope, that's a empty section. There we go. Just putting the color on this starts grounding it all as a real location again, and it starts making sense of all the black lines that we've been building up over the course of this stream. And we can see just how built up this enormous palace is. It's a pretty huge location. Okay, let's do these little wings that jut out from the main stairs that lead up into the palace. All very impressive. Big statue of one of the Holzkrugs there, being very impressive. Probably the last emperor during the Dark Ages. That's the time from Warhammer, the old world. It's quite likely, though, that that emperor will be written out when they do all of the new princes of Altdorf and the electoral princes. So it'll be interesting to see whether the Holzkrugs survive in that regard, or whether they be relegated to history of Warhammer lore, or possibly just relegated back a couple of generations, because the Holzkrugs ruled from Altdorf for quite some time. The Holzwig-Schlesens who came to replace them being basically a new line entirely, installed by Magnus the Pious. A combination of the older Holzwigs and the far newer Schlesens. Far richer Schlesens. The Holzkrugs had the blood, the Schlesens had the money. Both inside the Principality of Reikland. Let's just pull that. That's some statues there as well. I'm just going to quickly run straight over it and then delete it because it'll be quicker. Well, there's quite a lot of buildings to fill in here. Apologize for taking quite so long on this one. We're almost there. Just finish off this wall, and I'm going to just go straight over again because it's quicker to go over the lines and then rub out the bits that I don't want than it is to actually be neat. Okay. I'm there. I'm as well to finish off this last bit of building too, aren't I? Okay, we're almost there. So I'm going to look at the comments once I've done this, and if there's anything in the comments that modifies it, I'll do some quick modifications to the map. I will then do the shadows and highlights for the main palace section here, and that's when it will start to pop and look significantly different to how it currently does, where at the moment it's just flat colors. That will hopefully bring it all into perspective and really bring it out and make it look pretty. Okay, a little bit there. Are we done? I don't believe it. We're actually pretty much done. Let me just drop in that little section there. In fact, I should be good. I'm doing it and then just sort out our wall while we're at it. It doesn't take long. Pull that down there. Okay, right. I'm going to go check the comments. And once that's done, yay. Oh, a little bit's over there. Once that's done, I'll get my highlight and shading. So let's go jump in the comments and see what we've got. Oh, yeah. Right, so where were we last? Here. Actually, can you explain House Holswig Abenar? Or is this something you save for your stream? I'm not up to date. Okay, so House Holswig Abenar is... so the older sister of Karl Franz married into the Abenauers on the condition from the Holswigs that the Holswig name was kept. So they became the Holswig Abenauers. Their traditional land was down by Castle Reikland. The Holswig Abenauers have been there for quite some time. And the sister of the emperor, the older sister, lives there. The older sister's son is Wolfgang. Now, you might find that some of the books will give slightly different versions of it, but that was the version that we were running from when we started writing it all. I'm not sure how much of that survived through to the end. So that's Carolina, as I recall. I need to go check her name. It's on my bloodline chart. The Holswig Abenauers, that the elder sister of the emperor is a Holswig Abenauer, as is her son. And the person that they married used to be the Duke of Dunkelberg, but he died and the Dunkelberg line passed over. There's a whole bunch of things that come up in our stream regarding that, because the emperor also has an older brother who should have been emperor but couldn't be because he came a witch. That is a character that has been shrouded in mystery from that point. Some people believe he's his uncle. Some people believe he's the emperor's cousin. But in truth, he's his older brother, and he was the one who was supposed to be emperor, and he was given Dunkelberg. And sadly, he became a witch, so Dunkelberg was taken from him. Most recently in our game, Dunkelberg has now been passed over to Wolfgang Holswig Abenauer. Cut a long story short, they're closely connected to the imperial family. Endurance grudge muttering. Not quite sure what we're talking about there. If you could clarify. I can see the dwarves. It's probably something to do with the dwarves that we were talking about earlier. I can see the dwarves doing a sort of tug of war with the massive chains. I think they could. Lovers get dragged into a mud pit and get their beards all dirty. Yeah, quite right too. I imagine that's meant to be losers, but I quite like the idea that they're all lovers because that just made me laugh. Yeah, losers. But you know, big beards. Thanks for streaming this live. I haven't caught up with your live play. You're a very good Jim. Oh, thanks. Thanks for saying so. You put a smile on my face. Hey, Jenks. Is Marienburg the redheaded stepchild empire asking for political reasons in my Topbringer campaign? Kinda. They're not actually part of the empire. Marienburg is a completely different faction. They come from a place called the Wasteland. Wasteland separated from the empire about 140 years ago or so, about 100 years ago, in fact. And it separated entirely from the empire and became the Wasteland. And they have an entirely different form of rulership. They have an entirely different form of governance, i.e., they've got different ruling families who are not noble, although one of the families is strongly connected to nobility. The city itself is massively cosmopolitan and has arguably the strongest ties of any old world city through to Althuin, where they actually have somewhat of a pact with each other should there ever turn to violence with the empire, or Batonia, both of whom look on at the golden jewel that is Marienburg at the mouth of the River Reich, the center of trade for the old world, the old world's largest city, a city that's significantly larger than Altdorf, a city that, if you go by the current numbers that were bandied around when I was last in the studio, is easily 1 million to 1.5 million people down there. It's a truly enormous city spread across all the islands, and in many respects is indeed the red-headed stepchild of the empire. Everyone with any great power in the empire harps on about how Marienburg should be brought back to heel and the Westerland should be reinstated. Particularly important for the cults of Sigmar, because they believe that the boundaries that were laid out by Sigmar 2,500 years ago should always be the boundaries of the empire, whether we're talking about the times of expansion or the times of retraction. And Marienburg has long been seen by the cult of Sigmar as part of Sigmar's holy empire. The same goes for good chunks of Kislev, though. You must remember that Kislev was invaded about 1,000 years ago, that entire area, by the Gospodars. The Gospodars swept down from the World's Edge Mountains and took over large areas, some of which used to be part of Ostland, some of which used to be part of Ostermark. So what we now see is modern day Kislev. It wasn't always like that. It used to be tribal lands of the Ropsmans and the Ungals and the various other tribes that were still under the Three Kings or whatever. And the Gostar swept them aside. But a huge chunk of that land was owned by the Udoses, for example, or the Ostrogoths, the old Sigmarite tribes that had to be pushed back, which massively weakened both Ostermark and Ostland. Ostermark eventually got taken over by Talabheim land completely, but eventually rises again at a later date. Hirondenne drops in, some sort of rock toss, perhaps, caber toss. It does seem very dwarven, doesn't it? Anything that seems to be gently attached to feats of strength, and also the caber toss, you can't help but think it looks very frustrating. They're wandering around with their big giant willies. Largely, I say that because there are so few dwarven females, and it just sort of makes people laugh. Having said that, though, one assumes that the dwarven sex drives are very different to humans. French unicorn, boulder lifting, indeed. Indeed, anything that sits in the Highland Games seems like it fit to a certain degree, particularly because so many of Games Workshop's writers have often viewed dwarves as either one of two types. One is Northern Yorkshireman type folk, or alternatively Scottish folk, both of which have got their own traditions of various types of games. So one of the sports definitely has to do with stone. I agree. Bob said, going back to the spirit thing, what are the head gardeners, a disgruntled head witch, pun possibly intended, sowing discord as well as seed? So we already have a strong hedge witch location sitting down here, and right about here. I don't know if you can see me making sort of borderline marks there. I would be loath to just fill it with hedge witches. They're rare. There's not many of them, particularly within cities. Hedge witches don't normally do gardening. They live out on the periphery, that's the whole point of the hedge. The hedge is the boundary between civilization and no civilization, and that is where they live. They live in the hedge. So bringing them into the city in many respects weakens what they are as a type of character. If we're doing it properly, we should throw them all the way outside. The reason we've got one inside is because this particular hedge witch has lived there all of his life, and the city is built up around him. So the civilization came around him rather than him moving on, and he has yet to move on. So I'm moving on. Something to do with Bellow, maybe? Last one, not to get the heat stroke wins. Oh, I see what you're saying for, yeah. Bellows, I see, it's for the dwarves. We're probably too expensive for roof tiles. Probably not for them, but as we've said already, the locations that we've got here are not purple or brown. It's just the colors we're doing them so we can immediately identify them. When we pull back, like so, we can immediately see where all the important locations are in the city. It's for that reason and that reason only that they're purple and brown. It's not because they're actually purple and brown. Sorry, English, obviously. That's okay, French unicorn. We're more than happy to have in. I remember when I was sitting in some French forums all the way back in Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 2nd edition, and they were the loveliest people in the world making do with my extraordinarily bad French, and it was terrible. But they had some new books that had just been released there for Warhammer, and I was answering questions, particularly about the Tome of Salvation, and each one of my posts must have taken about 15 minutes to write because my French was that bad. Rogan Bob said, hi again, Rogan. From the reading material in the old world, Prince Wilhelm of Altdorf rules as the emperor in Altdorf, but he's Wilhelm I, same name as the White King for Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. Interesting that Wilhelm I that they've gone for. I'm actually just going to quickly go. Let's see if I've got it sitting. Emperors. So I've got a list of emperors that have come out through all the various editions of Warhammer down through the ages. Let me just pull that up here and see. So what year would we be looking at? We'd be looking at about the end of 2300. So Wilhelm III is 2503. Let's see when my previous Wilhelms are. Do we have an earlier Wilhelm? I don't think we do. I think they've got off with it. Ha ha! Love it! There is no listed earlier Wilhelm, at least in the ones that I've spotted. So the Halskrugs rule in the Dark Ages Altdorf line from somewhere in the region of around about 2100 to 2243, somewhere in between there. It's not marked, all the way up to Magnus. So I imagine that's not going to be the case. So Prince Wilhelm might be of House Halskrug. I wonder if they'll ever detail it, because if they don't detail it, then we have no canon issues. We could just drop in Prince Wilhelm of I'm going to write Wilhelm the First in now, just so that I can. Let me just pop that in there into my. Thanks very much for marking that out, because I've still not looked up over the old world stuff and so on. It's trying to turn it into Wilhelm II. Nope, Wilhelm II first. So you'll often find that the House Halskrug is sometimes called the House of Second Wilhelm, because they say it was founded by Wilhelm II. But when you look into it, it's not. It's founded by Wilhelm III. That was Wilhelm Halskrug. Wilhelm the Wise is more commonly known. That was back in 2429, somewhere around about there. But that's because he's Wilhelm II of Altdorf, the Prince of Reikland. He's the second Wilhelm of Reikland. He's the third Wilhelm of the empire as a whole. So that's a nice little detail for you, which means that the first Wilhelm must be that one Wilhelm I. Wilhelm I of Reikland and Wilhelm II of the empire? We possibly have a problem. That's not going to work, which means you need to have a Wilhelm between the two of them to get the Wilhelm II. They're missing a Wilhelm. That's interesting. But anyway, Justin comes up, many thanks. Had a lengthy discussion on Facebook groups a while back. You included. Yes, we do indeed talk about these things. Dwarven sports, important. Outlaw hammering, random question. Well, sort of. Since we're on the topic of the Empire, what are your thoughts of the Mootland? It's awesome. Why doesn't the Empire get a good amount of rare spices, food, not to mention pipeweed from the Moot? I find that an interesting point to make, beyond the fact that they're using them themselves. I would be interested to know why you think they wouldn't be getting a large chunk of, say, pipeweed from the Moot, because generally speaking, in most books, they do. So if you've got a particular point that you're raising from a book, I'll be interested to know which one it is specifically. I haven't caught one that says that strongly. I'm going through my head, but there might be one, because, you know, there's a lot of sources. Did that come in Fantasy Roleplay 4? I'm trying to think of what Andy did for Fantasy Roleplay 4. Andy Leask, who was in the stream earlier, he did a chunk there on the Moot. And Steve D did a little bit extra on the Moot as well. Didn't check what Steve D did, so maybe it's in his article. Does the palace courtyard need something to break up the space? Memorial trees, for example. No, I'm keeping this very open on purpose. I'll do a little bit of extra detailing on it to try and give the idea that it's a bit worn. But I'm leaving it open because this place is meant to very much be used to show off Empire stuff. So if they've got a very important dignitary arriving here, they will line this entire space with soldiers, and they will not want anything blocking that. They'll want the cannons there. They'll want stuff that just impresses the shit out of whichever ambassador is popping by. So this is basically a large mustering ground. It's almost certainly paved. The entire area is flattened out. There might be, I imagine, that it's inscribed all over the place with maybe even every single last paving stone is inscribed. There could be imperial crosses on here. There could be signs of Sigmar. There could be all manner of awesomeness. It will be impressive, but flat and empty, to ensure that anyone that comes in can be impressed by whatever appropriateness they install. Because if it's an ally that they don't want to perhaps intimidate too much, they may dial it all down a little bit. But if they want to get foliage out, they can just pull in like large plant pots or equivalent. So I think I'd rather leave it open for all it looks a bit empty and dull, particularly from the top. Could Wilhelm I be representing himself as the first Wilhelm of the Empire? I mean, yeah, he could. Wilhelm I, but Wilhelm III. So in 2429, the Emperor is Wilhelm III. He is the third Wilhelm of the entire Empire, which means that between Wilhelm I, and Wilhelm III, we need another Wilhelm. The problem is they have mostly been detailed between there. You've got Magnus, then you got Leopold, then you got Matthias, then you got Dieter, then you got Wilhelm, then you got Matthias, then you got Matthias, then you got Leopold, then you got Karl Franz. Now, you could potentially squeeze someone in somewhere, but between there and there, it's going to be tough. The only real area you could squeeze someone between would be, I mean, it's the von Krieglitzes. They on Fagger line. I can't see where we can get a second Wilhelm in. I'm sure it will be figured out by someone, because they've possibly created an issue by making it Wilhelm I. Even though he only ruled the Reikland. Yeah, I gathered that's what you meant. And he... You know what? I think you could probably get one down the electoral line on that. I think I could fix that. In fact, yeah, I think that'd be could fix it. I'm glad you thought it could be impressive. That's good. And then Heron drops in. Once the Reikland takes the top spot again, they might have sought to retroactively legitimize his rule through the Wilhelm II name. Yeah. Yeah. I think Magnus will fix it. Magnus can rename folks, and we can leave it to that. These sort of tiny political details that the studio rarely worries about to any great degree, but for someone who's writing a roleplay game, it's exceedingly important that you get all this shit right. Anyway, let's get our shades in, because we're reaching the point where I need to be stopping. It's getting quite late. I've got some other things I want to do, and I'm very keen to get my shades in place for this. So let me just soften that off. That's not being softened off at all. Do that again. Right, so if you want to know how I'm doing my shades, as I said already, it's all covered in the tutorial that I did for the Rookery approximately, I don't know, 6 months ago or so. If you want to know more about that, go check Rookery Publications Discord, or alternatively, it's going to be tall. Just ask me over in the Discord channel, and I'll explain what we did and how you can get access to those tutorials if that is what you want to do. I have got entire tutorials for not just mapping like this, but for many other mapping styles as well, as part of the Rookery Publications Discord. It has channels. It has nothing to do with law hammering, so don't think that it does. You will get very confused if you start looking for mapping tutorials over in law hammering. You will not find them. It's because they're not there. And I'll go up for a flat roof and then go down like so. I'm tempted to pull that in thicker at the top. There we go. Right, so we're going to quickly drop in a bunch of shadows here to just provide a little bit of extra depth. Once that's done, I'll check the comments again, because doing the shadows sometimes takes a wee while, because there's quite a lot of them in complex buildings like this. Once I've done the shadows and checked the comments again, I will then run back to the, there we go, highlights, and we'll get all our highlights in place and check I haven't made any mistakes in the rest of it, which I likely may have. I do love a big castle. It just puts a big smile on my face. Big castle being a big castly thing. We can make our tower relatively tall, our big clock tower, our wall, or oops, it should be down at an angle. Outside wall of the palace, love it. Let's get the shadow in up there as well, connecting the whole thing. So the shadows just help the whole thing pop. Much like I've said multiple times, it's not about making them perfect. It's about getting them in place so we get a general idea of how the light is working its way through the city. I will say one other thing on my shadows. If you know anything about anything, you probably know that the sun rises in one side of the world and settles down in the other. And if this map is aligned north-south, where I have the lighting come from, makes literally no sense at all, because it means that we have the lighting coming from the north. I don't care. I've done it on purpose. I've done it on purpose because the shadow's coming down, and that way just generally looks better on most maps when you have them going up. It leads the eye in the wrong way. we as particularly those of us who speak English, or indeed any of the Latin languages, we read from left through to right, and we read from top down to bottom. So having our shadows going from left and right down to the bottom just sort of makes sense for us. And when we change it, it leaves it feeling a little bitty off. You look at it and you're like, there's something wrong about it, and I can't quite place what is upsetting me about this particular map. And it's going to often be as simple as where the lighting is sitting. And I came to terms with this some time ago. I hate it because I'm a bit anal about things being right. In fact, I'm very anal about things being right. And it makes me uncomfortable to actually do it purposefully wrong, which is what I'm doing here. I am doing it purposefully wrong. I'm going to put in the shadow for that wall, even though it can't be seen because I haven't done it yet. But I still do it this way nonetheless. Let's pop in our shadow there and then bobble it down. So I'm about to be finished this. If you've got any questions or observations about any of this section, I will address it. And then we're heading off towards our highlights to get this all areas highlighted. And we'll probably be moving towards the end of the stream as well, because, oh, this is a tall tower. Very tall tower. That one's going to go over the, like that, then like that, and then down this way. This is the Celestial Tower. It was built for a Celestial Wizard. So it's about there. Leave it approximately there. That'll do. Tidy that up later if I need to. I do love a big shadowy map. Okay, that's us just about finished. Let's just shadow down the side of this wall as well while I'm at it, even though it's not coloured in yet, just so it's done for later. And as I said before, this isn't about being neat and tidy. This is about just getting all in place. I've missed a big shadow here. That will be out of shadow. That'll be in. That'll be in. And this section here will be in shadow too. Gosh, this takes a long time. I did warn you that the shadowing sections are one of the longer parts, but we're now largely done. Okay, let's shadow off the outside of the maze, but not necessarily all the inside, because it will just mess up what we can see and become difficult. I'm quite happy with that in general. Yeah, okay, cool. Now let's go check our comments. I don't think we've got too many, so this should be super fast. Unless I understood, I've seen it's a problem with legitimacy rather than timescales. No, it's just timescales. I'm squeezing them all in. Sigmar bless Magnus. He indeed is going to be the fix for absolutely everything. If you could hold for roughly 40% of a download, that'd be stellar. We'll see how that goes. Erin MP adds, is either side of the palace building entrance supposed to match shadow brown? I'm not quite sure what part you're asking there. Could you reconfirm that when I apologize, MP? And also, great to see you there, MP. Thanks very much for commenting. Did we mean at the front here? Oh, actually, there's a little bit there that should come out. And the same for that part there. Let me just type that in. So if you could confirm which bit you mean, I will answer that in particular. And then Carl. Hi, Carl. Should the front entrance be purple? I think last stream you talked about having lots of platforms for someone in a wheelchair. Oh my goodness. Let's just say yes. I can't actually remember the last stream. So let's just do that now. That won't take very long. Let's go slightly smaller one. Let's make that place super cool. I have no recollection of the last stream. In fact, while we're here, is there anywhere else that looks like it should probably be purple? Given the distribution so far, we could purple off this section, have it a walled section, and discuss that as a location. And we'll pop that one on too. We need something around here somewhere. So I'm going to mark off one of these as purple and maybe the main part there. We'll grab one of the main stabling area, assuming that is stables. I'll find out when I go look back at the old stream and find out that I've just made something else completely purple. I seem to recall there's some sort of bathhouse or something over there that I really wouldn't mind recalling either, but I can't recall. I'm going to make one of these purple for that, and then we can fill it out later and figure out exactly what it is. But I think that's a good place to start. Okay. MP says yes. So is either side of the palace building entrance supposed to match the shadow? I'm not quite sure which part you mean there still. Well, what's the rectangle there? As in this part here. That is in the previous stream, so you'll need to check there. I also need to check there because I did this previous stream months ago and I'm playing catch up. So I've got a little bit there. It was for a bright mage in a wheelchair. So the bright mage in a wheelchair is the Master of Apprentices. And the Master of Apprentices, if he's coming anywhere, is going to be coming down towards the State Army Barracks. So I don't quite recall what that is. I'll have to check the previous stream. I meant the grand entrance to the palace. So right up at the front of the palace itself over here. Is that what you mean? Or do you mean the main gatehouse down here? If you mean up there, here, are you saying that that should probably be a nice purple location because it's the front part of the palace, for fuck's sake, and that's too fucking awesome? If so, you know what? I sort of agree. Let's do that. And let's mark out that section there. If that's not what you mean, please confirm and I will resolve it. Can't remember his name, but I recall him shouting at Elric in the Tales of Aldorf. Yes, I remember his name well. The Master of Apprentices is quite the chap. There's no other way of putting it. Lord Magister, pardon me, Tuberman. And Lord Magister Tuberman he's a character, one of those rare bright wizards who has managed to live for quite a long time. While I'm here, let's just quickly fill in the wall color for that. And for over here, that sets us up beautifully. Right, so if that's everything, I'm going to do the highlights because I refuse to have all of this done without getting the highlights in place. The highlights are super easy, by the way. If you haven't watched any of the previous streams, you're about to see just how easy. I do not do this the hard way because that's not the point. The idea is to do something pretty simple. And as I've mentioned on more than one occasion, the tutorials that we did for these maps were to show you how easy it was to do these things, and that pretty much anybody can make a map that is on a professional level with a little bit of time and patience. Now, you might think, yeah, bullshit, Andy. I don't believe you. But over on the Rookery side of things, we've already had several people posting up the maps that they made using the techniques that I showed in my tutorial. And they're pretty damn gorgeous. In fact, one of those people was on this call just earlier. On the stream just earlier. Martin's been doing an awful lot of really cool maps using the techniques that we have been using on the stream. That bit goes higher. That should be taken out of the shade. Right, so as I was doing, let's just pop that into place. Right, so let me just do this very quickly. I'm not going to do this very neatly. I'm just going to get it all in place fast. So it makes the areas pop. Like so. So I'm coming to the end of this particular part of the stream. Next week, because I will be going live again next week because I enjoy mapping and it's my moment, my opportunity to chillax and do some stress-free stuff. Today I've been squeezing words into documents for most of the day for Rookery stuff, for our Ship of Fools adventure. It has gone through another change and I had a bunch of words to squeeze through on that. And it's nice to do something that has literally nothing to do with words, just to chill out, draw some crazy mappage, chat out what we're doing with cool folk like yourselves, and see where it all lands. Whoops, highlights. I'd also like to say a huge thank you to absolutely everybody who has dropped by and dropped in some suggestions. Every one of them makes an enormous difference to this. We wouldn't have Kalegen if it wasn't for all of you. And the Kalegen that we're building would look completely different if it hadn't been for doing these streams. I'd done this myself, it would look, well, it would look different. Let's just put it that way. It'd be a completely different location. And I've always been a strong advocate of, there we go, teamwork for these things, because when we get all of our minds together, we always create something better than if it had been created by us individually. It was something that we talked a lot about when we were building The Enemy Within. Graham and I would spend ages just discussing all the different ways that we could use parts of the setting to make a really cool story. And repeatedly, he would say something, I would bounce off it, we'd bounce off each other, and we'd end up with something quite unlike anything that we had built individually. It was quite the extraordinary creative process. We really enjoyed it, and we ended up with a position where he was writing the first draft and I was coming in to add in all the extra bits, because I knew a lot more about what had happened to Warhammer since, say, 1992 than Graham did. So rather than him worrying about trying to squeeze in every extra detail, learn them all, I just added in all those extra details afterwards because it was quicker and easier. And that allowed him to move on to other books. And it was a good time. I really enjoyed it. Oh, there's a shadow I missed. Let me just fill that in. There we go. And another shadow I missed. And already, as we look at this, you can see that even though all I've done is just scrape over some whitey bits over it, it's beginning to pop quite nicely. It's yeah, it's definitely beginning to pop. Look at that. And now I'm just looking at it for the first time. It's yeah, I'm liking this. Now again, our gardens have been very, very quickly put in place. These are not the best gardens in terms of their rendition, but one of the important points of this stream, of the whole Kalegen stream, was to show that you can create really lovely maps without necessarily doing all the things that might. That's beginning to look like it's now forming into the rest of the city. Let's have a quick check on the old comments. Oh, pardon me, my cats are arguing. Oi! Stop it. Thank you. Just let us shout at my cat. Right, here we go. Trying to remember, did we say in a previous stream that there would be a racetrack of some sort somewhere in the city? Yes, we did, and we were going to put it on the outside. So that's going to be outside in the north. Papa Vanig... I'm going to say... let's just call you Papa. That means I can't get wrong. Vaniglia? Looking forward to next week on the Lawhammer stream tomorrow night. Me too. It is truly exceptional. Oh, thanks. I don't say that lightly. Oh, well, that's a lovely thing to feel like I'm ending on here. I've been enjoying doing Papa V is fine. Oh, I do like Papa V. Hey, Papa V. I shouldn't do that. That's just not a good lookup for me. I've been really enjoying doing our streams. They've been a bit of a lifesaver for me, actually, because I was, and still am to a degree, exceedingly ill. I'm on the tail end of it now. The drugs are doing their job, and I'll be lifted out. My energy levels are super low in comparison to normal. And we've done what, 25 streams now? And of those, I'd say at least 10 of them I have almost no recollection of because I was so high in drugs when I was doing the actual streams themselves. It's one of the reasons that the GM blogs came to a bit of a halt, because I couldn't remember enough from the stream itself to write the GM blog. So I've got to go back and watch them again, which is going to be exciting for me to see what actually happened. I mean, I've got the general gist of it in my mind, but I don't have the overall details in place to actually do a proper GM blog. So those are going to be probably happening over the course of the next week or two as I catch up with all my GM blogs. The GM blogs go to all the all access patrons over on the Lawhammer side. But yes, I have been enjoying it immensely. It has been a lifesaver. I'm also looking forward to just being well when I'm playing them, because once I'm well, everything will just connect a little bit better, I think, because a lot of the tail ends of the stream, say the last hour or two, have just been me phasing in and out, rolling in circles, no idea what's happening, trying to hide just how knackered I am. It's going to be odd to actually do a stream without being knackered. I'm not sure what I'm going to do. Right, so let's have a quick look at where we are and conclude. I didn't expect to get much done today because, well, we're doing a relatively short stream, and I say a short stream. How long are we going? Almost 3 hours. But I knew there'd be quite a lot of chat because it would be the first coming back to it. Next week, there'll be a little bitty less chat and a little bit more mapping. My intent will be next week to completely finish off the rest of the palace, finish off the remainder of the bit of ground that's sitting down the side of it. Let me just get a red brush so you can see what I mean. So we're looking at, let's get a nice big red brush. This entire area here, including all of this here as well. So we'll finish off these areas, get it nice and clear, make it look funky. I'll probably mark out that I want to add extra gardens at the back, but I won't do those yet. And then we'll go to a completely different part of town. So for that completely different part of town, I'll put up a quick poll over on the YouTube community links, and I'll link to it from Discord. I'll pop that up tomorrow. And I'll put up 3 of the areas, and you can decide amongst yourselves which one you want to see most. And I will then dive into that. We've got a whole host of fun places, including a big midden ball field, which is going to have to be placed down there, middle class areas there, lots of fun things to draw. So I'll pop up a link for that over on Discord, and the post itself will be in YouTube. But beyond that, thank you all so much for coming along. It has been an absolute delight to be mapping with you through the course of this evening. And if you're coming to this stream much later, perhaps days, weeks, months, or even years later, thank you very much for watching on the video on demand at a later date. If you want to know more about all the Lawhammer stuff, go check our Patreon and Lawhammering. The link is inside the video description. Obviously, if you're watching just now on Twitch, it's not there, but it is over on the YouTube side. And as always, please, if you haven't subscribed to us, do subscribe. It makes a huge difference to us. And do please like, leave comments, do all those things what people do. And I'm now going to lean back and say, I enjoyed that. Thanks all. I shall see you all later. Bye-bye.